Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's Employee of the Month, 2 months in a row. Leave a message at the... Hi, Jamie. It's me, Jamie. I just had a new idea for our song about the Name Your Price tool. So when it's like, tell us what you want to pay, hey, 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 and the trombone goes, blah, 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 and you say, we'll help you find coverage options to fit your budget. Then we just all do finger snaps while a choir goes, savings coming at ya, savings coming at ya. Yes? No? Maybe? Anyway, see your practice tonight. I got new lyrics for the rap break.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Blog Talk Radio.
TV party tonight! TV party tonight! TV party tonight! TV party tonight! We're gonna have a TV party tonight! Alright! We're gonna have a TV party, alright! Tonight! We've got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews. Everybody's gonna hang out here tonight! Alright! We'll pass out on the couch! Alright! Tonight! We got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews. Don't talk about anything else. We don't wanna know. We're dedicated to our favorite shows.
I think that's where that normally cuts off. Hi, everybody. Welcome to TV Party Tonight. I am not your regular host. This is normally Mark's job. And lest you confuse my accent for that of Mark Radulich, which has actually happened in the past, funnily enough. But I'm Robert Winfrey, and I believe Mark will be here shortly. But real life does have a way of intervening with the best... again, the old saying... Man plans and God laughs. Tonight, however, we've got a pretty full house for the show tonight. Again, Mark will be here. I'm here. I've got at least Sean Comer and Jesse Starcher here with me as well. I'll bring them on in a second. And tonight we will be discussing the Netflix series The Punisher, just in case the title of the show didn't give that away. So, yeah, again, Mark kind of like threw the kitchen sink at us in terms of guest invites here, but we'll it'll be fun. It'll be fun. This will be interesting. So, anyway, while Mark, again, finds time to call in, dear Lord in heaven. Oh boy. All right. First up, I don't even know half these numbers. I hate my life.
Take your time. Take your time.
Anyway, let's start with Sean because Sean was actually here before I was in terms of waiting in the queue. So, Sean Comer, how are you doing tonight, sir?
Oh, I'm Sean. You're not, and I'm doing fan-bloody-tastic. Playing Mass Effect 3 while we talk about surprisingly what might now possibly be my new favorite Netflix Marvel original.
Okay, before I go on, I have a joke that I don't know if you've seen it yet or not, but The Disaster Artist came out. And I hate James Franco with a burning passion, but the reviews for it have been the reviews have been interesting. It scored really, really consistent oh hi marks.
Nice.
I wish that was original to me, but it's not. All right. Moving on.
My short and sweet opinion, having not seen the movie yet, is simply that even the worst actors have that one role that they would have to be actively trying to somehow miraculously fuck up. They're just that born for it. It's like I think Will Smith might be one of his generation's most overrated actors, but casting him as Muhammad Ali, it was a slam dunk. There was just no way he was going to screw that up. It was too perfect. as irritating as we all find Franco, I think we were pretty sure that he was somehow going to manage to nail this.
All right, next up, calling in, we have... See that? Okay, I believe that's... okay, Jesse, you're up, unless there is some other Skype account known as the Starcherer. I feel pretty safe about this one. How you doing, Jesse?
Speak up, my Krogan Battlemaster.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right. Also, let me see
Jesse,
here.
Are you there?
Oh, there's Mark. I knew you were one of those. Finally got you unmuted.
Yeah. So everything, I can't get anything to work. I'm currently calling in on my cell phone. I can't get Skype to work. My mouse just died. I can't get it to reconnect. I can't do anything right now other than talk on my cell phone. So I'm a little.
I'll play producer.
You should get you. Jesse's in the queue. I don't know why he's not talking. And
if there's an issue, it's on his end.
And then that last number is Ronnie Adams,
who is also unmuted now, and the family's all here.
Ronnie, you there? Good.
Hello?
Yeah, so far.
Oh, this is off to a wonderful start.
We hear you just fine, Sean. What we're not getting is Jesse and or Ronnie.
I'm Ronnie.
Okay, no, we got Ronnie. We're only missing Jesse at the moment.
I'm Robbie.
Okay, so the only one that... Okay,
he's going to try calling back in.
And he's going to dial back in.
I'm Mark.
All right, let's... All right, thanks, Ron. We're out here and try to get... Oh, hey, I have a connected mouse. Woohoo. I'm going to take a deep breath here, and I'm actually going to try Skype one more time. If not, I'll dial back into my cell phone. Okay, Rob? Just kind of plow ahead for me.
All right. Okay, well, while we try to hash this whole circumstance out, hang on. I think we have Jesse now. Let me see if this will work. Because
tell me you... Can you hear me?
There we go. I got you this time.
The Starcherer has arrived, ladies and gentlemen. Thank goodness.
The notoriously abusive relationship between Blog Talk Radio and Skype continues. And bear in mind that is mutually abusive.
I'm sure I will drop out at some point in the middle of this podcast, so just be ready.
Duly noted. All right, Mark he brought up he's having some technical issues. I imagine we'll see him back momentarily, either via Skype or on his phone, and we'll plow ahead from there. But in the interest of not taking 40 minutes just sorting this thing out, because we are live. Yay! Woo! Live.
Hi, everybody.
Again, tonight we're going to be discussing, sort of episode by episode, again, the Punisher series that came out in November on Netflix. So, before we get going, I do this on Damn You Hollywood. I suppose I'll kill a little time while Mark curses at his machines. I'll go down the line here, just relatively briefly, as Mark is fond of saying, 50 words or less. Sean, Ronnie, and then Jesse. Any expectations that you guys had coming into this, when this was released, when some of the trailers dropped? Where were you, in terms of anticipation and what you thought you were going to get out of it?
I can tell you what I damn sure didn't expect, and that is I didn't expect a surprisingly soulful, heartbreaking treatise on the high cost of war. That certainly caught me off guard. I mean, I expected it to be visceral, creatively violent, to borrow a phrase I heard on a YouTube video earlier. I expected there to be more blood than paint on the walls. And
I do love that expression.
Yeah, so do I. And this kind of defied that right from the very beginning. I did not expect a humanized Frank Castle.
All right, Ronnie?
I'm kind of the same way. I expected a storyline, but I didn't expect what I got. I I figured there would be killings and shell casings aplenty, and which there were. Don't get me wrong. there was plenty of that, but I expected more kills than story, and I got a lot of story, and I really enjoyed it.
All right, Jesse, to close out this segment, then we'll just plow ahead into the first episode.
10 years old, okay? 10 years old. I relished seeing the Punisher on the screen, and then I got Dolph Lundgren, okay?
To be fair... Well, to be fair, nobody could have saved the writing in that particular movie.
Agreed. But I wanted something that was definitive, either big screen or small screen. And so anticipating this, yes. When I saw his debut, Jon Bernthal, or Jehoshaphat Bernthal, as Mark likes to call him, showing up in season 2 of Daredevil, and I was so excited. Then to hear we got a spin-off Punisher standalone series, and I was like, okay, all right, can it beat that? Can it beat what we saw in Daredevil season 2? Because that to me honestly was the quintessential Punisher that I've wanted to see since I was 10. So I was anticipating it, and then when the trailer dropped with Metallica's One behind it.
I love that trailer so much.
Holy shit, was I excited. As a matter of fact, I've probably watched the trailer 3 times since I've seen the series because I thought the trailer was so good. But yeah, man, as far as anticipating, my goodness, as a kid, this is my favorite comic book superhero. I wanted to see something spectacular in front of me on TV that I could share with the rest of the world, and I'm glad at least we got this. We got this. So,
yeah, I loved that trailer so much. Not just because I'm a big Metallica fan, but it was utilizing gunfire in place of the timing up with the guitar riffs. It was about as perfect a trailer as you were going to get.
It was
all right,
brilliant. Yeah.
When Mark calls back in, he can join in as soon as he gets here. Wait, we might have him. Let me see if this is...
I'm here.
Yay! We got Mark.
Yay, Mark.
Holy crap, that was annoying. So, mouse disconnected, and suddenly Skype is different than what it used to be since I did some sort of update, which I don't know how that would have affected Skype, but I pay for a yearly subscription to Skype, which apparently no longer exists. So I had to redo everything, and now I have to do this $10 auto refill anytime you run down on credit on Skype. I'm just mad as hell right now. Yeah,
he's not going to take it anymore.
Skype is way different now.
Yeah, I just discovered this. I had no idea any of this was happening. So, I was listening to YouTube, and figured, okay, I have plenty of time to call into the show. I go to call in, suddenly nothing works, and then the mouse disconnected. Seriously, I'm at stroke levels right now. So, welcome to TV Party tonight.
I forgot to tell you, Mark, I sent my daughter down there to sit on your computer for a few, and now you were experiencing what I experience almost every Monday.
She found the cup holder.
Tell your daughter to stay the fuck away from my computer, Jesse Starcher. Okay, I can't handle it.
Will do.
Really, let's be fair.
Everybody.
This is just part of my long-term plan of vengeance at Mark, based around this movie schedule for 2018.
Yes, revenge.
You did this, you son of a bitch. You changed Skype on me.
I encourage Skype to change.
Okay. All right. So I'm assuming we've done all the intros. Where?
We were just about to jump into the first episode.
Terrific. Let's get started. Okay. So Punisher picks up where Daredevil Season 2 more or less left off. Frank is sort of mopping up what's left of who he deemed a part of the plot to murder his family, at least that he knows at that time. And then he finishes up that bit of work, and then goes into hiding as such, but takes on a new identity, starts working construction, starts to try to live his life, as best he can, try to stay off the radar, that sort of thing. We have a lot of people on tonight, so I don't want to talk too much about what's going on with the plot. Let's just sort of round robin. Thoughts on the first episode, Sean?
Sorry, I was eating a pretzel during all the talking about the Skype issues. My thoughts on it are, I love that opening. First off, it was hard for me not to just giggle and clap with joy at Frank Castle sending that bullet across the border from El Paso to complete his assassination. But like I said in the opening, it wasn't what I expected, because I expected sadistic, borderline gleeful murder machine Frank Castle. I didn't anticipate most of the first episode focusing on kind of a broken man without a mission. It was really kind of taking the Punisher right out of his element from the beginning, right out of everything that we saw in the second season of Daredevil that had already defined him for the Netflix audience. So by doing that, it already kind of had me thinking, okay, this is clearly not going to be a typical Frank Castle outing. I'm genuinely interested to see where you go with this. What are you building him up to? So, good way to start. Good way to kind of not just keep me off my toes, but kind of set me on my ass right from the beginning. Okay,
Ronnie, one of the things they set up right in the first episode is Curtis Coyle, who is a former Navy SARC, SARC rather, and he runs a PTSD support group for the veterans. He plays a pretty big role in the whole series. You get to meet some of the people in that group who will go on to play bigger roles later on in the show. What did you think of that element of not just the first episode, but really the series? You know, the series has something to say about vets, and they say it pretty loudly. What did you think of the writers of this and the showrunners deciding to put that into the Punisher TV show?
It was an interesting and I feel a needed element, because you look at this, you look at the character, you look at the man behind it. I mean, we can read all the comic books we want, and no matter whether he has powers or not, Frank Castle is sort of superhuman. A regular man is not. You know, no matter who he's taking, no matter what his mission, no matter what, he's going to need somebody to talk to. So it was cool to see that he had this friend and the bond that they shared. You know, they call each other brother, for goodness sakes. I mean, so I thought, it shows the bond that you know, my dad was in the military, and it just shows the bond that they have through the crap that they've seen and may have had to do.
The other person that we meet is Dinah Madani, and she's a Homeland Security agent. Hang on, I'm getting to you. We need Dinah Madani. She's a Homeland Security agent. Through her, we see the video that plays a huge part of this series, which is Frank's unit torturing a Afghan police officer and then Frank subsequently murdering him in cold blood. She is investigating against the wishes of her superiors who done what, where, why, and how. What'd you think of that plot thread, that character, that whole bit of business here as we start off in episode 1, Rob?
Oi. God. There's things about Agent Madani I want to say that I don't know if I should just front load all of this or if you want to wait until we kind of take this episode by episode. But, well, for one thing, she wears the wrong badge, and it kills me just every time I see that stupid thing. Like, again, I'm a detail person, so the fact that she's wearing an ICE badge rather than a DHS badge, it drives me up the frickin' walls. There's some really, really uneven and uninteresting writing that goes into her character. And it unfortunately hampers, what they're trying to do with her and her part of the narrative. Having this, the existence of this video evidence of various crimes and improprieties committed by the United States government. Rogue agents, actually, it's expressed very clearly later that these were not sanctioned actions by anyone other than one of our two big bads for the series. It winds up serving as a decent enough MacGuffin. And you do need some kind of inciting incident, I understand that. My gripe with... I'll save this for, I think it's episode 2 or 3 that Madani's character writing goes off the rails. And I don't want to bash the actress too much because there's a lot of... Again, there's some issues I have with the writing more than anything else, and I'll bring that up when we get to it. But for the purposes of just introduction, sure, she's just kind of there. She's marginally better than the average exposition dump.
Okay. Lastly, we won't see these characters again because they're all going to get buried in cement. A big part of this episode, sort of getting our feet wet, getting us reintroduced to Frank, and really, setting the tone for the show, is Frank's engagement with these other construction workers who are doubling as criminals. They've got a job that they're trying to do for some extra money. There's a new guy on the job site who tries to befriend Frank, at the time known as Pete, who's also involved with them. He just wants to be loved. This all sort of boils over where Frank not only ends up killing all of them, but kills, as a nod to welcome back Frank, the trade that we covered on source material, goes and kills a bunch of Manucci's crime family. Manucci! That's what this whole series was missing, was Manucci. But that's, we'll talk about that later. But he kills a bunch of people related to the Nucci crime family. But go ahead, Jesse. Let's finish talking about episode 1, and just what did you think of this arc to get our feet wet?
Oh, man. Let me tell you. You're waiting for the Punisher to unleash. You want to see him. You know what he's capable of. So you watch this one guy bully the other, and then he, of course, is bullying Frank, and you're just waiting for Frank to unleash hell upon these guys. But no matter what they do to him, he just kind of takes it in stride, and it's when they start messing with the other guy that tried to become his friend that, okay, tide's going to take a turn. And one of my favorite parts about this episode was not where, or this arc, I guess I should say, it was not where, the violence, the brutal violence that occurred with a sledgehammer, mind you. But when my wife looked at me and she said, he's going to fuck them up. Now, my wife, my wife don't know Frank Castle from a hole in the ground, but she knew what this character was capable of, and the way that Jon Bernthal was portraying him, she was just waiting. And I was like, this is going to get good. We're going to have a good time. And man, oh man, when he does, I mean, you're cheering for him as he's like taking the face off of one of the guys and burying the sledgehammer into it. I mean, it's gruesome, it's bloody, it's over the top, and it lets you know that, okay, this isn't going to be a mamby-pamby Punisher show. You're going to get what you want. You want to see blood, you want to see guts. Here it is. Get ready. Are you going to get it every episode? We'll have to see.
All right.
Well, to me,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say it was kind of sating everybody's.
Yes.
I don't want to say appetite, but
Bloodlust.
appetite for Punisher. Yeah, for Punisher violence. They're like, all right. We know what you came for. Here's a little bit. Hold on. Just wait. So, but we'll give you what you want in the first episode, but just wait for the payoff.
We got a story to tell.
Like Clutch said, don't worry, it's coming.
It's one of the things that I really like about this episode in hindsight. It really does set up the totality of the series in the sense that there is certainly violence, but it's spaced out in such a way that it still carries weight, and there's a lot of time for the actors to act. There's a lot of character moments. It's not a running batch of mayhem. And the first episode does a really good job of, even though you don't know it because you're only at the first episode, introducing kind of the pacing that the whole show's going to go at as it progresses. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I want to say one other thing about that scene at the end when he goes crazy with the sledgehammer. As a fan of violence, mind you, not only do I love that, this whole show does an excellent job of selecting music to go with big moments like this. And they chose some really interesting kind of death metal to go with that scene. Which not my personal taste, but it fit the overall. It fit what was happening.
Oh yeah.
And you get a lot of that. You get a lot of that throughout this series. There's one. I have a lot to say about. I believe it was episode 10, and the musical choices that they made along in that episode as well go along with this. But I really did want to take a moment and just praise whoever was responsible for that, because they did a really excellent job throughout this whole series of finding appropriate music, be that purely orchestral or stuff with lyrics to it.
All right, just because we lost so much time at the beginning with the various malfunctions and whatnot, I'm going to keep this going. But let me give my 10 words or less here on episode 1. I really like kind of the slow beginning. You have the rapid fire, him taking out the rest of the, closing the book on where we left him at the end of Daredevil season 2, and then sort of the tacit admission of, okay, he's won the fight. We're done here, and he just has to live now, which is great because that's kind of where he'll end up at the end of the series. Everything kind of comes back full circle. He thinks he's done, and he gives up being the Punisher. I really loved. Probably my favorite part of the episode is him, other than him going crazy with a hammer like Thor. Is him burning the Punisher emblem. It's burning his flak jacket, saying, "Okay, I don't need this anymore." I like the fact that the writers made as part of his character he doesn't have this need to always be the Punisher. Something has to get him going, which takes us into episode 2, where we get more of Micro. We have a reunification with Karen Page, who, I'll tell you, I hated Karen Page in Daredevil, but I really liked her in this. Like, I'm not quite sure what they did with her character. Maybe we'll talk about it, especially when we get to, 11 and 12, and that whole bit. But they made her stronger and less naggy in The Punisher, and I really, really liked that character turn for her. I also dug the kind of, will they, won't they romance between her and Frank. I thought that was pretty cool. But we meet...
As far as that goes,
Micro.
it's important to remember that this is Karen post the death of Matt Murdock in The Defenders. Bear in mind, death is in quotation marks there, but...
True.
So, Micro is a former NSA analyst, was killed while allegedly resisting arrest. The story about his death, however, was never released because Homeland Security agent in charge, Carson Wolf, personally shut it down. After visiting Micro's wife, Sarah, and bonding over the grief they feel for their lost loved ones, Frank tracks down Wolf and breaks into his home, where he elicits a confession about his involvement in Micro's quote-unquote death before snapping his neck. Let me stop there. Sean, let's talk a little bit about Micro, and then about our one great action scene in this episode, where you have Frank versus Carson Wolf.
Mm-hmm. Okay, which part of the episode do you want to talk about specifically?
I'm letting you. I kind of threw a couple things out there. I wanted to just get your reaction. What do you want to react to?
You know what? I like the fact that this season was as much Micro's story as it was Frank's. And as someone who's not quite as intimately familiar with the Punisher comics as probably you and Jesse and Ronnie are, I don't know exactly where he goes, kind of from where he starts out with Frank. But I could see that to a certain extent he does end up becoming sort of Frank's anchor to his humanity at some points, and occasionally perhaps even exasperating him. As you expect a good partnership to, they sometimes bring the best out of each other. And I don't know, I'm not sure really what to say about it, because, on the other hand, it's an important episode in that it introduces the two of them. It brings them together. It's a little while before we get to the really meaty stuff of their relationship. I really enjoyed the interrogation scene in the house for while it lasted. It still wasn't quite up to the full burning white hot Frank Castle that I was quite expecting. So I think I was still a little sort of, I don't want to say I was put off by the first episode, but still sort of reeling from having my expectations shaken, in that I'm having to see him suddenly do everything so much differently than how he did things in the second season of Daredevil. He's mostly got fewer resources at his disposal. In terms of weapons, in terms of sometimes the freedom to operate and move as he pleases. He's having to kind of be a half-measure Punisher, if there is such a thing. This is probably about as close as it gets to that. So it was interesting to see these two supposedly dead men teaming up to kind of try and reclaim a little bit of their lives they had lost, or I should say, Micro's case, reclaim his life. In Frank's case, try to deal with this guy who seemingly wants to prevent him from getting out of his. So I don't know. I'm not sure when it comes to that one specific topic, really, that I have much else to add, except that it was well done. It continued to build on where the first episode left off, and the chemistry between them was enough that right off the bat I was left wanting to go, okay, show me more. Let's see where the rest of this goes. So it was there. It wasn't the one always seen from the second episode of Daredevil, but I mean, it was still an outstanding fight scene to kind of headline that whole episode.
Jesse, you're one of the more familiar people with Punisher. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
How close did they get Micro?
How close?
How close is the character of Micro?
Okay. Well, let me tell you that this was an interesting part of the show for me because I knew that we were going to get to see how Micro and the Punisher became friends, and that's something that I didn't know much about in the comics themselves. Micro in the comics was just this. I don't know. He was like this. He was helping Frank out, but I didn't know why. And it's not like I was reading these issues back to back, and I might have missed something at some point. But he seemed to always be the guy that helped Frank out. Why? I never knew. But they didn't seem to really dive into the either the emotional attachment that he had as to why he was doing this. So I really didn't know a whole lot about the backstory. Physically, Micro was this, I would probably compare him to me. He was probably a little bit bigger than I was, and I'm a big guy. And I'm not talking about height either. I'm talking about width here, ladies and gentlemen. He was just your typical hacker dude that could help Frank out whenever he needed to. But I was so excited when they brought in the Punisher van. For some reason, I always associated Micro with the Punisher van, just because a lot of the comics I read, Micro get the van or something like that. But, this was more of an in-depth look at the character of Micro than I was ever familiar with. So this was all brand new to me. So somebody else might know better.
Ronnie, you want to add anything about the Micro character?
Yeah, it was definitely a reimagining of Micro because, just like Jesse said, he physically looked nothing like he did in the comic books. If you want to take a look at what he looked like in the comic books, look at the Punisher Warzone movie, where Wayne Knight played Micro.
There you go.
That's more along the lines of what I'm used to Micro looking like. As far as, Micro was always a super intelligent, like you said, hacker that was always Frank's eyes and ears. Always found out where he could find more weapons. He tricked out, Punisher's battle van, the whole nine. So as far as they stayed true to the character of Micro of being the I hate to say it like this, but being the brains of the outfit and Frank more the brawn. But it was definitely a new take on him because I think the reason in the comic books, if I'm wrong, somebody please correct me, but I think Micro's son was killed or got involved in crime in some way. I think it was definitely somebody in his family. I think it was his son because later on, they in more recent issues, he has to. It's actually Frank versus Micro, which was kind of sad.
Ooh,
but
that is sad. That's like, these are two brothers breaking up. Come on.
Yeah, and so that's why he got involved with him. But so definitely the whole analyst and faking his death and things. It was a reimagining of the character and making him this tall, neurotic guy. Other than the shorter, sassy guy that Frank usually deals with, was a different take, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I'm not opposed to reimagining characters to make their backstory a little more a little more diverse. But
yeah, they did this one well.
If you want to see, if you want to see more like the comic book character, watch Punisher Warzone, which actually, in my opinion, is the better of the movies. But they did a really good job with this one, with reimagining the character of Micro.
He has a really great line in this to try to convince Frank as to why they need each other, and he says, every missile needs a guidance system, and I thought as the episodes move on, I thought that was very, very apt description of their relationship, especially the amount of damage Frank can do. Rob, real quick, and I mean really, 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 really quick. We meet Billy Russo, who will go on to become Jigsaw. The big bad in this. What did you think of that character?
I found it somewhat ironic's not really the right word, but I got a significant laugh out of the first part of this movie when people kept calling Frank Castle a hipster. And then to kind of augment that, we get this interpretation of Billy Russo, who, while certainly not a hipster, is in terms of physical presentation, is every bit the turbo douche that exists in that age bracket, from his haircut to his suit cut to his demeanor. And it's a real credit.
See, if I can interject real quick, that was one thing that kind of started getting on my nerves, as I started wondering if whichever writer wrote that particular script kept using the word hipster without really looking up what it actually means.
Frank, in some of the beginning part, does resemble a lot of the hipsters that wander around Brooklyn nowadays.
I thought he more represented the homeless.
Maybe a little bit. I'll give you in terms of the beard and long hair, sure. But I mean, most of the hipsters that I've met, between my time as major cities go, living in Columbia and Kansas City, Missouri, and Phoenix, Arizona, they're definitely much more sharply dressed than Frank.
Some of that's geographic. Some of it is a waitress that is clearly from a model that doesn't necessarily understand what hipsters are.
I guess, because I didn't get a hipster vibe at all.
Neither did I, but the thing I wanted to say about Russo, and it's a severe credit to the actor that when he is put in positions, and to the writing as well, there's a certain, I don't know if it's generation, I don't know if it's a mindset or whatnot, but I see someone that looks like he does, and I instantaneously form a relatively low opinion. And again, we all prejudge. There's only so much that we can, as long as you're aware of it and you can try to work around it. But people who, wear, again, hairstyle, facial hair, suit cut, the whole 9 yards. I just look at you and I look at people like that and I think, God, you're a jackass.
What?
And I do. Maybe it's just me. But the actor then, when he is put in circumstances where he gets to show that he is more than this, that a lot of the reason behind his presentation is that he comes from nothing and has worked extraordinarily hard to become successful and is now simply emulating things that are trendy around him. That's a lot to his credit. I really like that there's a lot of characters in this show that for the first 6 or 7 episodes or so, you don't know where they fall.
Yeah.
There is inevitable reveals, but there's a lot of, okay, do we really trust Billy, or is he going to wind up turning on us to be typical? There's Madani's partner that you're not quite sure, again, because somebody's going to screw you. That's just the way these things are written. And you don't quite know who it is, and then they introduce Madani's mentor, and you're not sure what side of the fence he falls on. And I liked that. I liked that they kept you off balance. They engendered a little bit of the paranoia that the characters are feeling, trying to figure out, who can we trust when dealing with something like this.
You and I will have to agree to disagree on that one, I think. I mean, I'll even disagree with the notion that that even Billy Russo kind of fits the definition they gave him. Again, sorry to kind of beat a dead horse with the hipster thing, but no, most of the hipsters I've met will pay exorbitant amounts of money to look poor. Especially, good God, especially the trust fund hipsters. But there wasn't really anybody that kept me on my toes all that much. And again, having no knowledge of the Punisher lore, I knew there was a character named Jigsaw, and I kind of put two and two together at the very end of the series. But yeah, I knew that there was something up with Russo almost from the second they introduced him.
I'll second that on my end as well.
Yeah. Telegraphed it so hard, the founders of Western Union probably sat up in their grave and said, "Damn." But everybody else, no, I thought it was pretty clear straight down the line where everyone was aligned. I guess you could say I never got the feeling they were trying too hard to swerve me on something. Not that that's a bad thing. Sometimes things can still play out entertainingly despite your knowing crystal clearly exactly where they're going. But
go ahead, Sean. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but was very much a shock. A few actions in terms of, oh God, I can't believe he just got away with that, maybe. But maybe it's just a difference in my people instincts. But there weren't all that many actual patent surprises to be had over the course of the show, I thought.
I was going to say, I watched that trailer so many times. There was a point where I think they showed Billy Russo walking away from an explosion in the trailer, and I honestly think that might have swayed me to go, okay, don't try that dude, subconsciously, because I don't remember going. I didn't analyze it like with a fine-tooth comb. I just remember seeing him walking away from an explosion with a smile on his face, and I was like, that didn't sit right with me. So that might be something where the trailer kind of spoiled it for me. Here's the other thing. I did not know Jigsaw's real name. As I'm supposed to know comic books here, ladies and gentlemen, but I just hopped onto the Wikipedia, and the comic books, his name is Billy Russo. So I didn't even put two and two together till the very end. I just know Jigsaw.
Well, yeah, Jesse. Somewhere else in Ohio, Cole Marentet weeps for you.
Yes, I can hear his sorrow.
One thing that I will say about the Billy Russo character is, my problem is I spoil a lot of things for myself, because I will watch this or The Runaways or The Gifted, and as I watch the show, I'll go through the Wikipedia page and see which characters in the show have links elsewhere, letting me know that they are characters in the comic book. So as soon as he showed up, and I'm like, and who's Billy Russo? And I'm like, you're Jigsaw. Terrific. Well, when does that happen?
Damn internet.
But what I'll say this. I guess because I ruined it for myself in episode 2 upon meeting the character, every time I saw him banging Madani, I was very uncomfortable. I was like, this is, you just want to yell into the TV, don't do it, Madani. He's the enemy. So that might have actually helped my enjoyment of his creepiness and his villainy, was knowing that ahead of time. Because I don't know if I would have picked up that he was, early on, if he was one of the bad guys without reading it first. Let's get into episode 3. Let's move this along. This episode, I feel like, is a necessary evil. I'm not even going to read the synopsis for this because there's two parts to it. One is the very long, very drawn-out, naked questioning of Micro tied to a chair. And then there's the flashback to Frank and Billy in Afghanistan and what led to Zubair's death. So let's break this in half. Let's first deal with Frank torturing Micro in the chair. I'm going to go to you first, Robert. I'm going to just put out a statement about how I felt about it and let you respond to that with your own thoughts. But I said this was a necessary evil. I think if Frank had too easily trusted Micro, it wouldn't have been believable. So I think there needed to be an episode just spent on getting over that hump. But this also felt like it went on forever, and thank God for the flashback stuff because at least it broke it up. But this is one I couldn't wait to end. Go ahead.
Yeah. I have a comparison here that I'm not entirely sure how helpful it'll be for a lot of people out there, but in terms of this being necessary, yeah, you do have to have because these are not trusting people. Like, just their fundamental natures are mistrustful of other human beings, especially new people. Frank's never quite sure who he can trust. Micro's living in a glass jar because a lot of important people want him dead. So you do need the bonding experience, and in this instance, it comes through, I can't even really call it torture because there's not a lot of it. Frank actually has a great line about torture being more about time than about physical pain, which is true, incidentally.
You tie me to a chair naked, I'm going to call it torture. You don't even have to hit me. Go ahead.
The low bar starts here at the low bar.
But there's a circumstance that is, while different, there's a bit of similarity in terms of where the characters are supposed to wind up, and it comes from, God help me, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The second season, which is most commonly known for the superb evil that is Angelus, there's a bit right before, I forget the actor's name.
David Boreanaz?
I think it's one of the... No, the judge. I can never remember. It's a Baldwin, but it's not a famous Baldwin. It's like Adam.
Adam
plays
Baldwin,
Jane
yeah.
as well. Anyway.
Yes, that's Adam Baldwin.
The point of the judge is he is the evil counterpart of righteous justice, and he touches you, and any humanity that you have is burned out, and if there's too much humanity, it actually physically incinerates you, and there's plenty of characters that he either touches or his presence as he becomes more powerful will do this to, including a couple of the bad guys, this being Spike and Drusilla, who he frequently says your affection for each other is nothing but human weakness. If I were to touch you, you would die horribly. The whole point of this character, and he exists for all of 3 episodes. Well, they build him up a little bit. He exists for 2 episodes. His real purpose is revealed when Angel loses his soul and goes to the hideout of Spike and Drusilla. Because had he not, if we don't have this objective measurement of, Angel no longer having a soul and being a giant sack of crap, incredibly entertaining to watch, but still, then you would wind up having a bunch of, no, you really do need to trust me. No, I don't trust you. You've got a soul. No, you really should. Look, I'm doing evil, and you're only sort of doing evil. We'd get that whole back and forth. Instead, you have this character who can just physically touch him, look back and go, no, there's no humanity left in him, and then walk off, and we have now reestablished the relationship necessary for him to carry out being evil for the rest of the season. It's a clever enough plot device to actually circumvent what is essentially the point of this episode. And that's all of their getting together and all of the exposition and all of the inter-character and all of that stuff. Not everyone, and for all of Joss Whedon's many, many faults, he's a relatively clever writer when it comes to tinkering with convention. So here we clearly did not have anyone willing to monkey around with how do we potentially mitigate needing to have this, so instead we just get it.
Go ahead, Jesse. Why don't you weigh in here on the Frank and Micro stuff, and then we'll go to Ronnie and Sean about the flashback stuff, the Afghanistan stuff. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, you got to build. It's a weird way of kind of building this strange relationship. You kind of said it best. Frank doesn't trust this guy as far as he could throw him, and there's not much else other than to just kind of beat the living crap out of him until you know what you want to know. Now, he doesn't take it that far. It looks like he's going to, and you question yourself, is he going to do this? Is he going to, is there a possibility that he is going to do this to Micro and leave him a bloody mess? And what you get, you don't see that. The good thing is they strip it down to nothing, just like Micro, and they got to start somewhere. So, if you can't trust a man when he's naked in front of you, I don't know what else to say.
Can I just say that this also kind of messes with an exchange between these two later, when they're both kind of drunk, and Micro looks at Frank and goes, "You want to know something weird? I'm hung like a moose." And I wanted Frank, even in his quasi-inebriated state, to go, "No, you're not. I've actually seen you naked."
Here's what I'll say about that whole thing, other than it felt like it just went on forever. I did like the fact that they don't make Micro just a sniveling rat. He gets Frank. They go through the bit about if you don't let me check in every once in a while, the place is going to blow up, and that's actually not what was going to happen. Something else was, and he goes through a couple of paces like that, and then he uses the opportunity of Frank falling, of lulling Frank into a false sense of security to get out of the situation, and knocks Frank out, and it's basically like, will you please come to your senses? If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead by now.
The follow-up line he has where, Frank, if you really want to fix the problem you find yourself in, you do need me, because I'm one spook, and I just took you out and could have ended you. You clearly do need someone like me.
Right. So this isn't, and this is a horrible comparison, but it's the first one that came to my mind. He isn't Rob Schneider from Judge Dredd, where he's just a useless sniveling piece of nonsense.
You really,
that's attached
Mark,
to him.
all you had to say was he's not Rob Schneider, because that's all Rob Schneider is. The role is irrelevant. That's just Rob Schneider.
Specifically in Judge Dredd, or for that matter, Demolition Man. I think it was the same deal there. But no, Micro, I feel like, is a yin to Frank Chiang, and in many ways his equal. While Frank, and they even say in the episode, in the series, Frank is sort of a blunt instrument, and as Michael calls himself, he's the guidance system. They are on equal footing in their own special ways. Let's get Ronnie in here. Ronnie, why don't you react to the flashback stuff where we get to see the relationship between Frank and Billy in Afghanistan, and we get to see what all led up to Zabayer being shot in the head.
The relationship between Frank and Billy was definitely another new thing. It was written specifically for the series, to my knowledge, because I don't think he and Jigsaw ever served together in the military. From what I remember, he was a more of a mafioso kind of a fellow, just organized crime leader with a jacked up face. I say it like that, but as far as the flashbacks, I mean, this was part of the story to me. I mean, it's necessary to get background and to lead into these characters and everything. But I was kind of, after a while, I just wanted to go, yes, we understand that there were some bad things that happened. Can we just agree that, that it happened and we have to resolve this? I don't want to say it was boring. It wasn't boring. It was just one of those things I was like, oh, let's kind of get to the point.
After a while.
Yeah. I just wanted it to be resolved. And then, get to the Punisher murder scenes. But
make with the killing. Let's go.
Make with the killing. Come on, let's do this. They kind of just didn't have an effect on me, really. I mean, other than setting up the fact that as soon as he was introduced, I didn't realize. I myself didn't realize that he was going to be Jigsaw. I mean, as much as I like to say that I do know about comic books, I don't know that much as far as his real name and everything. It didn't dawn on me that that's who that was. But when he was introduced, I was like, something ain't right about this cat. And so.
I have a really quick question for you, Ronnie, and I want you to answer the question quickly because then I want to use the transition into getting some thoughts from Sean. So, Sean, listen up here. They go out of their way to make Frank a complicated character, a complex character, in the sense that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but in the comics, the Punisher, he's driven to murder criminals in the street because criminals killed his family. And in that sense, he's a sympathetic character. Prior to that, there was no revelation of anything particularly horrifying that he had done. We'll call him a victim. A better way of saying it might be survivor. In this series, they went well out of their way to make Frank not necessarily an unsympathetic character, but not 100% sympathetic either. They made him very complex. He's the executioner in the Zabayer footage. And, you can use the old adage of, well, he was just following orders. What's a man to do? And of course, as I watched in the Runaways episode tonight, yes, so do the Nazis. That doesn't really work. So I'm just curious is if you know anything about the Punisher and the comic books being like this Punisher, and then I want to get Sean's thoughts on them taking a hero character for which they named an entire show after and saying, he's not altogether a great guy. He's really messed up and he's done terrible things, and he's somebody who's really struggling with a lot of that. He's not just rage incarnate, and a pretty cool fruit who really knows where his towel's at. Go ahead, there, Ron.
What part did you want me to comment on?
Oh, for God's sakes.
Repeat everything you just said.
Galaxy reference.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TV Party tonight. Tonight, our favorite show is Punishers.
Starting with episode 1.
I started thinking about what you wanted Sean to answer, and I was like, man, and I forgot.
He wasn't listening.
God damn you. I want to know if they made him this complicated in the comics.
Oh, no, not to my knowledge, not to my remembrance. Everything I've read, Punisher Warzone, the newer Punisher, and it's always been he's a revenge machine. Because bad guys killed his family, he kills bad guys. And
right.
I've never really known him to be as complicated as he is in this. And obviously you're going to realize that he's not altogether there or altogether good guy, no matter whether it's in this series or in the comic books, because he murders criminals indiscriminately, whether it be, the low-level drug dealer or the crime boss. It doesn't matter to him. I read there was a big thing called the Punisher Back to School special. And I got it, and it was just yeah, I know, right? And so the Punisher Back to School special, he goes undercover as a gym teacher and the only people that he right. It's one of the greatest comic books ever. I was like, this is brilliant, you know. And he teaches some of the kids like martial arts and stuff like that he learned in the service, and you know, they all learn a good lesson at the end. The more you know, but he goes through these drug dealers inside the school and just eviscerates them, destroys them. I mean, and then you think about what he does to the higher level guys. You know, it's not a you know, get your life right kind of thing. You know, whether you're, you know, you know, 18 years old just out of high school slinging drugs, or, you know, or whatever, or, you know, you've been doing this for years and you're a seasoned criminal. It does not matter. You broke the law. I mean, and you possibly murdered people, so he's going to murder you. So he's not altogether there as far as being a quote-unquote good person. It's very, you know, with him, it's very black and white. It's very it's right or wrong. You did it or you didn't. We saw that in Welcome Back, Frank. He was going to let that one guy go, and he's like, I'll give you one chance. And the guy said, you know, I survived this. You know what that means. We're sitting on enough product to set us up for life. And he comes back in and breaks the guy's neck. You know, he's like, well, shouldn't have given you a chance. You know, you done messed up, so I'm going to kill you now. Not even a tap on the shoulder, kind of thing. It's that, no, you done messed up. You dead. So it's, you know, he's never really been a good guy, but in this one he's more. It's not so much that he's a good, you know, a worse person. He's just more complicated. There's more feelings to deal with this Punisher than there is in the comic books.
So, Sean, what I want you to react to is this notion of creating a star character, a lead character, who's this complex, this morally ambiguous. Somebody who straight up murdered a cop in Afghanistan because he was a soldier and he was, quote, doing his duty, but is also somebody who is out for revenge for the murder of his family.
Oh, well, thank you for wording my question in a direct fashion, Mark. My God, I feel kind of bad for Ronnie.
Look, stay with me, people. It's a roller coaster of a podcast. You keep up.
Well, what?
Welcome to my average Tuesday night, everybody.
That hot mess was a lesson right out of the Phil Donahue School of Rambling Interview Questions. My God.
Nothing wrong with what I did. Nothing.
Go
ahead.
I feel like I should have mapped that on scratch paper with a number 2 pencil. Well, let me tell you something, Gene Mean. I'm quite okay with what they did with Frank. You also excuse me because that kind of went on for a while, and I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit, because I was kind of formulating my answer while I was listening to Ronnie's. And I think it kind of ties into why I also do enjoy the flashbacks. And the fact that in the comics, yeah, Frank is the type that a number of times the bad guys he faces, a number of them will occasionally just in their last moments on this mortal coil muster enough of a backbone to point out, wait a second, asshole, you're no different from me. You're just killing indiscriminately. What makes you so special? I mean, you're taking lives without any conscience, and Frank's answers might as well amount to, and?
Yeah.
You know, yeah, okay. Yeah, the only difference is I'm killing I'm killing what I see as bad guys. Which, generally, I imagine, if he would let them live just a few more seconds, the ones who didn't just say, "Oh, you got me there. Go ahead, 2 right in the 10 spot, get it over with. Would probably say, well, when did you get to decide who's a bad guy? And something I'll get to hopefully in a little bit more depth toward the end of the show is that this is not the Frank Castle from the comics. This is somebody who has done bad things, but setting up that element of his backstory ties in to something else much greater that the Punisher accomplishes that none of the 3 theatrical movies were really intelligent enough to get across, even if they had tried, I think. And that I'll even venture to say I don't think most of the comics that I've read have ever really bothered with. But again, we'll get to that because it's also something about the Marvel Netflix universe that I'd rather bring up to get you guys' thoughts on. But in the meantime, the reason why I like the flashbacks so much and why I have no problem with the torture sequence is because it clearly illustrates what Micro can see very plainly with his own 2 eyes, and probably the only thing that keeps him from wetting himself with fear while he's strapped to that chair. And that is that Frank Castle is a man who was simply born to walk the battlefield. In those flashbacks, we get to see Frank doing exactly what he does best in the days before you could argue that he had really truly perfected it. When he was still at times often just simply a gun going off half-cocked. And yet, what Micro sees and what probably lends him a little bit of sense of assurance is the fact that where Frank is headed and where they're both headed is going to lead him into battles that he's not remotely equipped to win, that he doesn't even know how to begin to fight. And those are the ones that Micro knows he's cut out for. He gets the notion that there are places that Frank can infiltrate and things he can do that he can't, and that those things are going to need to be done if he ever wants to see his family again. And at the same time, he knows this can work because he realizes that if Frank wants to keep going, and he's already a part of this, whether he wants to or not, and he's already probably got a price on his head, then the fact is he's going to need my skill set because he's clearly either just not smart enough or just not trained to do the things that are going to keep him alive in the end. And he proves that. He outsmarts him and plays him every single step of the way because Frank operates fantastically on instinct. But when it comes to being 2 or 3 moves ahead in a scenario in which he's not wading shins deep into blood and viscera, and he's not ducking bullets, he's kind of lost to guys who physically, obviously he shits bigger than after a hearty meal, but who also realize that in some scenarios, if brains were dynamite, Frank wouldn't have enough to blow his nose.
Jesse, real quick, go ahead and weigh in because I know you had something to say about this, and let's move this on because we're only on episode 3.
That's all right. Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's a moment in episode 3 when he storms that compound and he's being besieged by all these, all these enemy soldiers coming at him. You can see where Frank Castle takes a very dark turn. One of the things that I've heard in the past, I guess it was just recently, somebody had explored the lore of Frank Castle in the comics, and they talk about how he was insane before his kids and wife died. And that, I think, is shown in just it's almost a split second. I would say maybe less, but it's him going just ballistic on this one story. The guy's dead, but Frank is going nuts on the dude. And I think a lot.
Hey! To be fair, he was hitting him in the head with a rock, and you can never be entirely sure when that's actually succeeded.
You look in his eyes. Look at Jehoshaphat Bernthal's eyes, and you can see that he is a man apart from himself. So I think that was the one thing I took away from this episode is it felt like Punisher born. This is where the scales tipped. This is the genesis of what comes later.
All right, our next episode, I want to talk specifically now about Lewis Wilson, who is our vet, and I want to talk to you, Rob, about really, we can talk about the breadth of the entire series and how they deal with this one character. Let's do that now. As I said earlier, the Punisher speaks to the plight of the vet, how people who go into
in a mediocre fashion.
Well, that's what I wanted to. That's where I was going with this. I wanted to see how well they succeeded or did they not succeed in doing so. Not every character who was a vet is Frank Castle or Lewis. You have Curtis who has his issues, but he's been relatively successful in trying to move forward with his life. That's probably the best example of somebody who does okay after coming back from overseas. But talk to me about your thoughts on the Lewis character and his whole arc, because he literally goes up in smoke at the end of his arc. But it starts here. It starts. His whole story is essentially he's not able to adjust when he gets home. He starts by he's having nightmares. He's contemplating suicide. He decides he's going to dig a hole in the backyard because that's where he feels comfortable. Then he decides he's not going to re-enlist, but he's going to go become a private soldier for Anvil. And Curtis, realizes Lewis is not doing well mentally, gets to Billy Russo and says, that's a bad idea. And so that sets Lewis down this really, really violent negative path. So let's go ahead and react to Lewis's character and storyline.
All right, let me start out with there's a lot of military and law enforcement history in my family. A lot. My dad was in the Army. His dad was in the Army. In fact, he served in Korea. My stepmom's father is a colonel who served in Vietnam. My mom's father was in the Coast Guard. He was actually in a tank unit, I seem to recall, as well as National Guard, thank you, as well as a 30-year member of the California Highway Patrol. There's a lot. I got a lot of history. I came extraordinarily close to enlisting myself. This is as Hollywood as this show gets. They want to try and discuss the plight of the veteran, but there's a lot of both research and appropriate facts and things of that nature that were either not researched properly or completely ignored for the sake of narrative. I mean, you could write books on the things that this show gets wrong when it comes to the plight of the veteran. But this is also not intended to be...
Well, no, don't... Whoa, no, I'm not going to let you off the hook there. What are you talking about specifically?
The utter lack of appropriate discussion from all the relevant parties about the aid available to some of these individuals. The character of, O'Connell, the angry, pseudo-vet who winds up getting stabbed to death by Lewis. I forget his name.
Oh, Delaney Williams, who was also on, ladies and gentlemen, take a drink, The
Wire. I knew it was coming.
Woo!
Oh, yeah. Lord.
Bring the drinking game on. I got cold brew tonight.
Yeah. Again, they looked past a lot of that. There's a lot of resources for people suffering through what Lewis is suffering through. And
I challenge you with the idea that not everybody takes advantage of the resources afforded to them. Not to mention, and I don't want to get into a debate about this, but I think I think there are some instances where people have sought resources at the VA and have found them the resources wanting or unavailable to them.
I'm not saying it's perfect, the existing system, because it isn't, very clearly.
Okay.
There's a lot that they either brush over or outright ignore in favor of getting their narrative across. And to be fair, because I don't want to throw this whole thing under the bus as far as how they address this, that's not Frank's story. This is a subplot that serves purpose to the overall narrative. And if this were actually about Lewis, we might get a full couple of episodes where they actually delve into, in a much more intelligent and well thought out and researched and written manner, what goes on for people like that. Because it's not, they went the direction that they did, for better and for worse. And again, there's good about it in terms of how it structures in with the overall narrative. There's bad about it if you believe this to be a common thing. Or that there's a lot... I mean, people coming back from service with these types of issues is certainly not uncommon. But going down the same path that Lewis does is deeply uncommon. And there's a lot more...
I don't think anyone's suggesting that Lewis's story is normal.
Yeah, and which is another thing that I did appreciate, but again, there's a lot that they just... I believe a lot of veterans have actually written about this in the wake of the show, so anyone out there who wishes to... If you wish to understand more, you all have Google, you're all intelligent human beings. I trust you to be discerning about the information you pick up. Don't just take my word for it, please. As a catalyst for what comes along later, Lewis does his job admirably.
I hate you, Mark.
Okay. I'm sorry, Robert. We were too busy doing inside jokes there. The last thing you said was Lewis, the actor who plays Lewis, does his job admirably. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
The actor does a perfectly fine job. I do want to credit him for that. I mean, the writing and the show structure is not at all on him. He does a good job with the material that he is given, what he is told to do. And as a catalyst for some of the events that kick off that happen later down the line, he is... I struggle to say necessary, but as a catalyst for some of for various actions that are taken, for the realization that by the wider public that the Punisher is still alive. That particular bit of, plot point that he serves is, I suppose, somewhat necessary to the structure of their story, but I'm largely nonplussed by his character and arc. Again, the acting is fine, but beyond that, just kind of existed.
Does anyone think that Lewis's character arc and subplot was entirely superfluous to the overall story? Like, does anyone feel like they just sort of excised it out because it really wasn't necessary, or do you all? Okay, so you do. Jesse, do you feel like it was like, why is this even here, or did you see the purpose in it?
Their clear intent, I think, was to make you question, okay, what makes Frank different from this guy? I know we've kind of already asked that question earlier, but Lewis kind of put that there.
Did you get the tiniest impression that Lewis was actually going to turn into Mr. Payback?
He could have. If I would have read that story before I saw the series.
But I swear to God, I'm looking at this. I'm just when I kept going back to the wiki, I'm just like, tell me he turned into Mr. Payback. Tell me this is Mr. Payback.
He was there to make you go, okay, if the Punisher is doing this, what absolves this guy? because the similarities are there. Lewis flips his shit and stabs a guy to death. Shouldn't have done that. All right? Frank did a lot of things he shouldn't have done.
Shouldn't have done that one.
The key is that Lewis's methods are a bit different than Frank's. So, Lewis is killing innocent people. That needed to be explored because they needed to show what makes this guy different from other people. Trust me, we're all intelligent guys here. We know what makes Frank different from this guy. But there may be somebody out there that's going to say, what's the deal? He's doing the same thing, but then you got Lewis blowing up innocent people. Yeah, there's another. Put it on the box. Shouldn't have done that. Yeah, I liked it. The actor who plays that, I believe, is the same guy that played Lee Harvey Oswald in the 11/22. Speaking of Franco, Hulu.
I was so hoping he would never come up again. Thanks for that.
You're very welcome. All right, I'm done.
Actually, his presence actually stopped me from watching that series, and I really do enjoy the novel. So thanks, Franco.
Ouch.
I'm actually wondering, did anyone write a review? Does anyone know of a review that was written, or if anyone has written like an op-ed about the Punisher series of sort of an eye roll, like, oh, here we go. In the age of Trump, it's the angry white man with a gun. Is there any of that out there? Because I haven't gone through the Rotten Tomatoes stuff
that doesn't play into the liberal narrative. And we know that all the terrible reviewers are stifled liberals who want to write political pieces.
It's out there.
That's why I'm asking. I'm sure it's out there. Has anyone come across it?
One would assume. Like, I don't want to look for it. I deal with that enough.
Okay.
You know what? On my day off, let me go find a terrible review of a television series and just stab myself in the eye with it. Because I don't get enough of that on a regular Tuesday.
Normally, by this point, I've gone through the Rotten Tomatoes stuff. With Iron Fist, also there was like a bevy. I don't want to get too off topic here. Just so you guys know where I'm coming from. When Iron Fist debuted, there was a bevy, a litany of articles that were written about whitewashing and about how race played into the show and all these other things. Rob and I talked about that at length when we reviewed it. Another night where Blog Talk Radio was fucked up and we had to do it on YouTube, if you'll recall.
Feel free to look that up in the archives, everybody. It was a good time.
Yeah,
you got to yell at a lot of reviewers for being just terrible at their job.
Yeah, we spoke at length about that. So I was curious, but I hadn't seen a tremendous amount of what would be an obvious low-hanging fruit of an idea that, in the age of Trump, here we are, an angry white man with a machine gun, snore, that sort of thing. I just haven't seen it, but I can't imagine it's not out there.
Oh, it's
One last
there.
time, anybody?
I guarantee it's there.
Dude, there was one of my good friends, I've mentioned him before, that's been on the podcast, Dean Compton, an anarchist by name, anti-fascist by name, as a matter of fact. And he shared a piece that was just scathing about how the Punisher, it was a commentary about gun control also. And I was like, now the thing is that Dean Compton's like one of the biggest Punisher fans I know, and he was calling that utter shit. So there you go.
Okay.
Well, I don't think it is utter shit, and here's why. I did want to transition into this. He's a minor character, and he gets the shit stabbed out of him. But let's talk about him because I think his point of view is very loud on this show up until the point that he dies, and the fact that the way that he dies, being a fraud, I actually thought was purposely undercutting his argument. There is a very real and very present argument in this country about, and I don't want to debate the subject. I want to identify the argument. If you guys are with me on this,
I'll pretend, I guess.
So you want to argue about it?
No, I don't.
At this point, I just want to
get to
keep up
episode
with
4
me.
or 5, whichever one we're at here.
No, well, we're talking about episode 4 here, is where we get a lot of Lewis. And we'll talk about the car chase in just a second, I promise.
Okay.
But Delaney Williams's argument, O'Connor's argument in this thing is that, we as Americans are under siege by our government and by powers that be, and one of the ways in which they are attacking us is by trying to take our guns, and we need those guns to protect us. Now, the reality is that if you try to take on the American government, you're going to get blown up by a fucking drone. They fly over, don't they, Jesse?
What is happening?
They do, Chuck.
But it's a silly thought to think that you with your hunting rifle is somehow going to take out a fucking tank. But whatever. Again, I don't want to debate the argument. But that is a common enough argument in today's American conversation. And
they write for the last 20 years.
And they write this character. He says it several times up until the very moment that he's stabbed. And then it's sort of the characters are reacting to it in sort of an eye roll, but there really is no counter argument to it. It's just sort of out there. And then it turns out he's a fraud. And I feel like the writers were saying, see, the whole argument is shit because it's made by shitty people who don't know what they're talking about.
If I may, there is a bit in this show that actually goes the other direction later once we introduce the senator, who is very much like, no, guns are terrible things, and he is presented as an equally big bag of shit.
He, again, after being shot at, he's sort of reconsidering his position then, isn't he? I thought that was handled a little bit better. I don't know.
It was. Like,
some of your visceral reactions. All right, finish. Go ahead.
This, to me, reminds me of... I don't know how many of you have seen the movie that kind of launched Edward Norton as a serious actor. It's called American History X. I can only recommend one view. Edward Furlong is in it.
I've only seen it one time.
I don't think I could watch it a second time. It's too depressing. It's one of those movies that you only see once.
Awesome. Nope. Seen it dozens. It's amazing.
Sure, Mark.
It's great.
Oh, Mark.
What for me?
My comment there is not on the quality of the movie, but when that movie was released, there were several reviewers who questioned the lack of a coherent counter-liberal argument within the context of that movie. And to me, you get a bit of this, and I bring this up simply because you get kind of the same thing here in the sense that you have this character who is presented as detestable in every sense of the word, presenting an argument that a lot of people genuinely believe in. In the case of American History X, and to a degree, the same thing is true here. There's not a lot of counter-argument presented because the views espoused by the characters are so extreme, they don't actually need countering. The fact that they exist in the context that they do is enough to make any quasi-rational human being look at that and go, okay, this is clearly not correct.
I don't know. If someone who is paying attention to the national conversation, I hear his argument being bandied about by everyday people all the time.
Yes,
and
Mark, did you miss my important qualifier?
Okay.
I said quasi-rational.
Okay.
We do not live in a rational world anymore.
Okay. Here we go. Sean, did you have a reaction to the O'Connell character played by Delaney Williams, or was he just kind of there and really didn't buzz you one way or the other?
To the O'Connell character, not really. I thought he was obvious, and it should be patently obvious that he was a blatant caricature. He was kind of your stock off the deep end right wing conspiracy nut with just a touch of stolen valor scumminess to kind of flavor him. I didn't really have so much of a reaction to him as I was kind of really paying rapt attention to see where it was that the whole arc with Lewis was going to go. Although I had a pretty damn good idea from the time that he was rejected by Anvil.
Mm-hmm.
So O'Connell, no, and again, he plays into something that hopefully I'll get a chance to get into at the end of the show. But his character was a little happy tree in a bigger painting, and he was kind of the least remarkable bush on the landscape. So I didn't really have a whole lot to say about O'Connell.
Okay, so episode 4, which, believe it or not, is what we're talking about, is Resupply. And other than this stuff, which I thought was kind of more important to talk about, I would be remiss if we didn't actually bring up why this is called Resupply. Frank needs guns. Guns. And so this whole episode revolves around Frank and Micro stealing guns from a gig that's happening with the Department of Homeland Services, which ends in a fun car chase. Ronnie, give me 50 words or less on the car chase and the guns.
Every action series / movie needs a car chase. This was it. That's my take on it.
Well,
there was some lovely detail. I want to bring this up. This is the episode where they break in and steal their van, I believe. There's some really lovely detail in the body positioning after Frank gets done with them, and they bring in Micro because they need 2 vehicles. And there's one guy who's been shoved through a pinball machine. There's another who, and you really do have to have an eye for detail, has some wire clippers actually shoved through his ear and into his skull.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing that, it's the little things in life that make me happy when I'm watching something like this, I guess. For as much as there is the terrible, Madani wearing the wrong badge, literally, she's wearing an immigration and customs enforcement badge. Then there's Frank. Then there's bodies that are properly disarticulated and still bearing the wounds of whatever combat they've been associated with. So it's the little things in life, I suppose, that make me happy.
You don't really see Frank do any of that stuff either.
No,
correct.
Which is great.
Yeah, and it's more of the things that you don't see scare you more than the things that you do see. So
yeah, absolutely.
Him walking in the lone gun, and then Micro walking in and seeing absolute utter chaos that he left behind, is just like, who am I hanging out with? What is this man? What has he done? I'm with you on that. I enjoyed that whole scene, and the scene at the end of the car. This is where he plays chicken with our Homeland ICE agent, and
they're 2 different things. They're fundamentally different things.
Like Homeland ICE, what?
Yeah.
No, ICE is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It's a complete. They might have pseudo merged to one degree or another with the Department of Homeland Security after the latter's inception. But they are different things. You would not wear an ICE badge if you're a DHS agent. You just it's flagrant. I mean, that's actually illegal. You are actually impersonating a federal officer.
Right, down, boy, down. Go ahead, Ronnie.
I know the one thing I'm taking away from this podcast tonight.
They are 2 fundamentally different things.
You giddy. Go ahead, Ronnie.
The whole psychology behind the chicken, behind playing chicken with the agent. We'll just call her the special agent.
We're not gonna try anymore, huh?
No, not at all. It gives you a glimpse into, he knows who he's going against, and he doesn't kill cops, but he's still going to play chicken with her and end up destroying her vehicle and almost killing her and putting her out of the picture pretty much for a short. Well, what he thinks,
I'll tell you what
he thinks is going to be a long time.
I had a Skyfall moment there. Rob reviewed the movie, so he knows what I'm talking about. But one of the things I screamed about in Skyfall was when the car, they're supposed to be presenting that series of Bond movies, the Daniel Craig Bonds, as a little bit closer to reality than some of the sillier Bonds, where he's practically an indestructible superhero. And, and like I said, this one was supposed to be a grittier Bond. And then he has this car wreck in Skyfall where it flips the 1,001 times. And I was like, come on, that motherfucker's dead. And he just gets out of the car.
He had a similar car wreck in Casino Royale that should have killed him, too.
Yeah, I think this one in Skyfall really pissed me off, though. And then I watched the when Micro slams into her with the van, and the car flips over and blows up, all of the Simpsons and all that shit. I'm just looking at that like, nope, there's no way she lives through that car. I'm sorry. She's not even paralyzed, or has a broken leg or anything. She is like a burn victim. She has her boobs taped up in the next episode. Whoop-de-doo! I'm like, come on.
She had broken ribs. Come on, let's give
okay. I challenge you to get into a similar wreck and walk away from it the way she does.
I'd rather not.
Okay. I'm gonna. In the interest of time, I'm going to start doubling up on some of these, or we're going to be here till midnight. Episodes 5 and 6 are Gunner and the Judas Goat, respectively. With Gunner, they go to Kentucky to find one of his squad mates, Agent Orange, who is also William Rollins, sends a bunch of mercs to
who's
shoot
also on the Shield, who was also in The Wire, I'm fairly sure.
Hang on.
No, he's not.
Take a drink, Sean.
The guy playing William Rollins, that's the character's name is Rawls. This guy was not on The Wire. I know everybody in The Wire. Anyway,
we know.
So they go to they send a bunch of mercs to gun down Gunner and Frank. Frank ends up getting pretty much shot to shit, and Gunner ends up dead. So that's that episode. The Judas Goat, there's a lot of time spent on nursing Frank back to health. This is the bit where Lewis gets arrested on the steps of the courthaus, and he's unceremoniously abandoned by O'Connor.
And to be fair, he was arrested for nothing.
Yeah. That's always my favorite thing, when people come into my jail and they've been arrested for resisting without violence, and that's their only charge. So this is something similar to that. I'm just going to leave this one open. I don't have a whole lot to ask here as far as specific questions. So just a very quick 10 words or less round robin. Jesse, Rob, Ronnie, and then Sean. Any reactions to Gunner and the Judas Goat? Jesse, go first.
I just want to pose a question. How many times was...
No, there's no time for questions.
Oh, no. Frank Castle was shot in the shoulder how many times? I mean, I think he got shot in the shoulder in Afghanistan or Agrabah or wherever the hell he was, Kandahar, whatever it was. He got shot in the shoulder. He got shot in the shoulder. He took an arrow to that same shoulder, I think, from Gunner. Gunner shot him in the shoulder with a damn arrow, and I swear he takes another shot in the shoulder at some point later on in the series. And how he continues to have mobility, I have no idea. But
Frank is a victim of bad setup work from the people who don't quite understand where you could shoot someone and have them survive, and so they wind up either with a blow that is completely unrealistically survivable, like with Micro getting shot in the chest, or they overwork an area that is decidedly non-lethal but would absolutely ruin your ability to function as a human being for years, if not the rest of your life.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I'm like, okay, yeah, and he's pulling himself up with one arm. like later on, I'm sure he's doing that at some point. I'm like, dude, your shoulder's trash, man. There's no way. So how's that, Mark Radulich, for some in-depth commentary on those 2 episodes? I turn it over to whoever's next.
That's right.
I got a
Punisher
couple of
sucks.
things.
Be more realistic in your injuries. Go ahead.
To be fair, that is not unique to this show. Okay.
Okay. All
By
right.
any stretch of the imagination.
It is a Hollywood trope for every good guy to get shot in the shoulder, arm, leg. Shoulder, arm, or leg, and be completely fine once they heal up.
Well, at least once, but 3 times in a series? Come on.
He's Frank.
Every action hero in the history of Hollywood has Wolverine's healing factor. Move this along. Go ahead, Rob.
The couple of things I wanted to touch on, I really like the action sequence through the backwoods of Kentucky. There's a lot of really clever setups. Yeah. There's a lot of really great transitions in terms of camera angles. I love Micro getting involved with the drone kind of near the end once they've exhausted what they can do. And suddenly they get air support such as it is. There's a lot of really great action through that whole bit. This is also the series of episodes where the Madani character went off the rails for me. And with Mark's description, understanding that maybe she suffered such a severe head injury that her entire personality changed for the next, 6 episodes. And here's why. I want to elaborate on this because I don't want to just throw that one out there. And I've got a direct compare and contrast here as for why this bothers me. In the Luke Cage series, the character of Misty Knight, towards the end of that series, stops really following proper police procedure. She goes a little bit outside the traditional lines, and a lot of characters wind up suffering for it, and at the end she gets lectured by her boss about how you should have trusted the system. I thought it was the dumbest line from that character in that whole series, and there's some dumb lines in that series. Because they have explicitly set up that this police department is not to be trusted. So, lecturing a character who has already been burned multiple times about you should have continued to trust the system, well, how crazy am I supposed to be in terms of doing the same thing and getting the same result? But again, so we have a character in there who is very much Law and Order, and has her character adjust and takes actions accordingly based on an express circumstance around her, including her own partner being outed as a dirty cop. This all makes sense. In the case of Madani, as soon as C. Thomas Howell's character is murdered, she and her partner start doing things quietly and off the books and only between the two of them, apropos of nothing. You have a character whose one of her first actual lines of dialogue is, quote, "I trust the system," now for no discernible reason going off the reservation. It is terrible writing. And made more so because, again, I can point to at least one other concrete example of how that same arc was accomplished in a rational, logical, relatable fashion. And here it seems more like because they didn't have the budget to afford enough extras for her to interact with. I don't know. But it's terrible. It is just terrible. The directions that character takes drive me up the wall. And this is when they start kind of coming to a head.
Ronnie?
That was scathing. I mean, like... I don't know if I can follow that up.
Shut up!
This is my favorite show. I don't like you anymore. No, I agree with him because...
You are not the first person to have told me that.
There was too much Madani at some point. I mean, you just had to draw a line. I couldn't like her all the time. Go ahead.
Welcome to my every Tuesday, everybody. As Rob shit on everything I love. Go ahead, Ronnie. Ronnie.
I don't like it.
Of the Screaming Boy podcast.
Yeah. I agree with him not to a point, but I agree with him because at some point I questioned whether she went completely insane or not, because it was, if it was the car wreck, if it was the fact that she's not getting any closer to finding out who murdered her, her partner, all this other stuff. From somebody, and I noticed that somebody says, "I trust the system." She pulls her partner and says, "We can't trust anybody. We have to do this on our own." Wait a minute. What do you mean? It was just a really, really quick transition for this character to what's the female version of Johnny Law? Jane Law
Jane.
to
Sounds good to me.
Jane Law to Mel Gibson from Lethal Weapon. It was one of those things where it was like this character. She was good in some aspects, but after a while, she just grated on my nerves to the point of I just didn't want her involved in this at all. After reading the comic books, I started missing Detective Soap and Bud Plug, and I would rather see a secondary story with them than her, and her getting it on with Jigsaw there. It was just it was too much of Madani, too much of her, and this is where it took that turn for me of I'm kind of tired of her. I won't lie to you, when she was on the screen a couple of times I fast forwarded through her part because I really was not interested in her anymore.
And finally, Sean.
Hold on.
I hate to say it.
Sean, I want to give you a Kickstarter, okay? Hold on. I want to give you a kickstarting point. The punch heard round the world from Micro's son when he punched his sister in the face. Did you not go, shit?
Oh, yeah, dude. Dude's a little punk.
Jesus Christ, with sugar cookies, that kid.
No, man.
Holy shit. Both these two episodes, that might have been the most jarring aspect of both of them. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I hate to say this may have to be my closing point for the night because I wasn't expecting this to go two full hours, and I got a light sleeper niece upstairs, and I got about 12 hours of work that I got to get to in about 3 hours. So I'll just kind of try to leave it on this as best I can. Number one, I loved the assault on Gunnar and Frank in the woods. I thought it was fantastically innovative. It stood apart from everything else in the show in just about every way. It was tense. It was the two of them having to work pretty much almost entirely unarmed. And it was a great way to sort of bring him face-to-face with Agent Orange for the first time and let him know, I'm coming for you. Point number two, my God, Randy Orton watched this show and envied the condition Frank Castle's shoulder must have been in. Because my God, that's not even being held together by a full piece of dental floss. It's like a fiber of a string of dental floss. I mean, yeah, it's not a vital organ. Yeah, it would take you a hell of a long time to bleed out unless you hit it just so. But you can only do so much damage to that structure before it just isn't anymore. It is no longer muscle. It's barely muscle and bone anymore. It's pretty much just loosely stuck together stew meat at a certain point. And last but not least, regarding Green Lantern Dina Madani of Space Sector 2814, after the number of times and the number of ways she departs from procedure, goes off the reservation, and manages to nearly get herself and her colleagues killed, I would be stunned if she could get a job as an elementary school crossing guard. This was all said and done. All things considered, she probably shouldn't have even any longer been gainfully employed by the Systems Alliance military. When the fateful raid goes down that gets her partner killed, she probably should have been stuck on the sidelines long sooner. At least would have been just a little bit more believable. But no, we have to have that one loose cannon that still gets results.
Sean, why don't you go ahead and give us your total summation of this series, because I know you got to go. So I want to give you the opportunity to just sort of get out all your burning desires.
All right, yeah, I'll kind of get this off my chest, and I'll say right up front, and Robert, I'll stick around long enough to hear if you'd like to rebut this. You may not agree with me, and please understand I don't mean this as a vehement takedown or anything disrespectful. Much like you, I have both law enforcement and military history in my family. My dad served in law enforcement actively for more than 20 years. My family's military history includes 3 World War II vets and a second cousin who left most of his thumb over in Vietnam. That being said, I want to take things back to the plot arc with, I believe, I'm fading here a little bit mentally, Wilson is the kid who was really not all there upstairs, right? The one that Mark that you said you hoped would turn out to be Mr. Payback?
Yes, Lewis.
Okay, Lewis, thank you. I'm sorry. So about Lewis. What the Marvel Netflix universe does really well, I've said a number of times that what the MCU does is it turns the concept of the superhero movie on its head by making superheroes kind of the backdrop for other genres. Along similar lines, what the Netflix Marvel universe does is it uses superheroes to tell much more human stories. And each one tells a different one. Daredevil confronts the definitions of justice and the effects of guilt. Jessica Jones deserves every bit of acclaim that it gets for its depiction of PTSD and the survival of sexual abuse and assault. Luke Cage is a loving portrait to one of the cradles of American black culture, Harlem. Kind of both past and present, if you want to be honest about it. I'll be perfectly honest. I haven't watched a second of Iron Fist or The Defenders yet, so I can't really speak to either of those. But that being said, The Punisher is no different in that, as I said before, it tackles the price of sending Americans off to war for any cause. And is it entirely balanced? No, I will agree with Robert on that. It isn't balanced. It doesn't really have a counterpoint to everything negative that it points out. There's just nothing there, and short of maybe Curtis. I would maybe point him out as kind of an ongoing beacon of hope, but even then, he doesn't really exist as kind of an opposition. to everything, to all the tragedy and all the decay that he sees among his brothers in arms around him. But that being said, one of the things that struck me for a long time about American culture, that there's become almost what I would call an uncomfortable fetishization of the American military. And I'm not saying that there is no honor in serving. I have every ounce of respect for everybody who chooses to enlist, who would gladly, if America ever had to enter another war where legitimately our country's freedom, our way of life, our civil rights were all at stake, as they were generations ago. Certainly, I am and would be thankful that there were so many brave, eminently skilled men and women who were willing to lay down their lives to defend those freedoms and defend everything our country stands for. Because, you know, often I hear the argument whenever somebody is perceived as being a coward or being entitled, snowflake is kind of the favorite insult of the moment. There's almost always a veteran who pipes up and says, "Oh yeah, well, why don't you go enlist in the military? That would solve everything." Or that's kind of the answer to seemingly every societal ill. I think most recently I read in regards to NFL players who refuse to stand for the national anthem. Oh, make them enlist in the military. That'll set them straight. Well, okay, here's part of the problem with that, and it's something that the Punisher lays out pretty clearly. Not everybody is cut out to be a soldier. It's something that I heard from my dad for years on end, right up to this past spring. He grew up deeply fascinated with the military and World War I and World War II stories. His older brother actually did enlist and is retired DOD. And he was like, well, what? You got all these school loans you got to pay off, and you got laid off from your newspaper job. Why don't you go enlist in the military? I mean, not like in the Army or Marines or anything. Why don't you go enlist in the Air Force or the Navy or the Coast Guard? I always thought that would be kind of neat to serve in one of those. Well, yeah, that's you. Quite frankly, I know I wouldn't be cut out to be a soldier. I know that for a fact. And if it were to come down to a draft, and my number were to come up, would I show up and present myself for duty? Yeah, absolutely. But would I enlist as my first choice right now? No, because I'm not someone that I would necessarily want on the front line if it came to blows with North Korea or Iran or Iraq or anybody else. And that's one of the things that is kind of illustrated here, is the fact that not everybody is cut out to bear that burden when they come home. I up until recently, I recently had to move away from Phoenix for a little bit, although I'll be moving back soon. The name of Pat Tillman is spoken in hushed, reverent whispers. And I understand why. I understand it's because he left behind what could have been a multi-million-dollar athletic career, would have set him up for life, but no, instead he decided to serve his country and got sent overseas. That's the part you always hear about. Obviously there's the controversy and debate. Well, was he actually killed in action? Was it friendly fire? Why the cover-up? Well, there was, I believe, a published edition of his journals that came out recently, in which at one point he wrote while he was overseas, he said, We shouldn't be here. I object to the reasons for us fighting here, but I signed up, I took an oath, it's my duty to be here. And in the midst of celebrating everything, every Veterans Day and every Memorial Day, you see it all over Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else. If you enjoy your freedom, thank a veteran. Well, here's the thing about that. Yeah, I love and respect our fighting men and women too. A lot of my friends are now either were once or are now in the military, and I love them enough that as time has gone on and I've gotten older, I've come to resent the pointlessness of a lot of American operations. With the possible exception of 9/11, there has not been a full-scale war that America has gone to with another country that absolutely, positively, unquestionably needed to be fought by us since we got involved in World War II. And again, I point 9/11 out as a different story because as much as, yeah, we were at odds with the Taliban in Afghanistan, our real quarrel was obviously with Al-Qaeda. And the cost of that is yeah, while not every veteran comes back suffering the travails that you hear from the military men and women from Frank Castle downward in The Punisher, yeah, there certainly are those who come back and are just at a loss with what to do with themselves, and who seemingly paid that price for no reason, who come back to this country and can say, yeah, that really needed to be done. And I think maybe, and I'm just speculating here, maybe that was part of the reason why they kind of structured Castle's backstory in part the way they did, is the notion that he went over there, he was used as a tool for someone else's agenda, and he came back and probably sometimes had some doubts as to, what did I even accomplish by going over there? What did I fight for? What did I do all these terrible things for? As we found out later in life with my grandfather, when he came back from World War II, later we found journals that indicated that after seeing what he saw during the liberation of the concentration camps, obviously it kept him up nights. He couldn't sleep. He had nightmares. Sadly, he passed away before I was born while my dad was in college. I never had a chance to meet him, but as has been pointed out a few times among members of my family, my mom's side, he had a drinking problem, and I got to think it contributed to that. But still, I got to think that deep down he knew what he fought for, and he knew that it had to be done. It was a job they had to do for their country, and they weren't coming back until it was through. In this case, you look around the cast of veterans in The Punisher, and there's something else that you see that my dad kind of experienced sometimes as a police chief. I remember one time on a hunting trip, he was talking to one of his colleagues on the Mitchell, South Dakota Police Department. I forget which one it was, but he noted how he would get guys who would get this whole recruiting spiel in the military about, we'll train you to come back here and be perfectly qualified, more qualified than anybody else, to be anything that you want to be, to have pretty much a leg up over every other American. All you have to do is sign on the dotted line. Well, as he would point out, he would get guys who would come and apply to the police department, and and they would be like Army Rangers, and come bragging about, oh, I've got I've got hundreds of airdrops and jumps to my record. And Dad said, "Well, yeah, that's when I got to point out to him. Well, that's great, but we really don't do that many parachute missions on the police force." I hear you giggle, but the fact is, you get guys who get told this by recruiters, and I'm told that it can get especially manipulative. And well, in fact, I did, like Robert, I myself almost enlisted once, but fortunately, I was kind of talked out of it because I got the same big spiel. We'll pay for college, we'll pay for your training, you'll be perfectly qualified for any career you could possibly want to get into. You just have to pretty much sign your life over to us for this many years. Well, the problem with that being, the part they don't tell you about is the people who come over, and they're either kind of like Frank Castle in that they realize that being a soldier is kind of the only thing that they're ever really good at, or they just kind of feel like they left a part of themselves over there that they're never getting back. And it does make it hard to move on. Again, part of the whole mystique is supposedly, and I'll kind of bring it full circle and wrap this up by going back to the people who said, "Well, send those ungrateful NFL players overseas. Make them enlist. That'll straighten them out." Okay, let's get something straight here. Simply being in the military is not a cure-all. It is not guaranteed to make somebody a better person. In many cases, it does. It does instill discipline and structure and a sense of respect. But in some cases, you send an unrepentant, remorseless asshole into the military, and all that you get back is you get an unrepentant, remorseless asshole who's all of a sudden even better with a gun than he was before. In fact, that's why throughout American history you have had a lot of criminal organizations that have started that way. You had guys who came back from overseas and saw it as an easy way of money because, well, they'd already been shown how to kill people, how to break and enter. How to be organized and disciplined, and instead of taking that and turning that into a prosperous, legitimate life, no, they turned it into a life of crime. I seem to remember Ice-T once said something like that. And me and a bunch of other guys, well, we got out of the military and we already knew all these tactics and stuff. We knew how to handle a gun. So what do you think we did with it? So that's kind of why I appreciate this series, is it looks at so many of those angles, and it really breaks strongly from what is, I think, a too shallow, ill-informed, and dangerously one-sided mystique of this kind of chest-beating, flag-sticking-out-of-your-ass patriotism that soldiers are, all of them, absolutely to a man, demigod heroes. No, they're human beings. They are fragile. They are vulnerable. And most importantly, they are absolutely breakable. And as much as you see them revered practically on a level of Batman and Superman, it goes back to how President Trump at one point said to someone that who was handing over his Purple Heart to him, said, "I always wanted one of these." I don't think there is a Purple Heart honoree who wants a Purple Heart. I don't think there's one of them. I think mostly they would have probably rather never experienced what they did in the first place.
For those unaware, the Purple Heart is awarded for suffering injury in combat, if anyone out there wasn't aware.
Yeah. You take somebody who won a Purple Heart because they're now walking around with only 3/4 of the legs that they had before they went overseas. If you asked them, would you rather have that Purple Heart or would you rather have your shin back? I almost guarantee you 99 out of 100 are gonna say, you mean there's a chance I can have my leg? It serves as maybe not the best depicted one, but it's a cold bucket of water on this almost fetishization, this worship of military personnel as being practically superheroes. When I'm sure they would say, "Look, my God, you have no idea what we suffer. You know, you have no idea what we go through." And for all of them that are proud of their service, and by all means, hats off to you all. Again, I'm sure there are just as many who probably came back from Iraq in the mid-2000s or the 2010s and were left asking themselves, just like I did, what was all that for? What did we do? What did we accomplish? What was at risk here when I went over there in the first place? So that's it. Long-winded as it was, that was kind of the big thought that the Punisher left me with.
All right, thanks, Sean. Appreciate you being on. I know this is we have a lot of people on, and we could probably all talk about this for 5 hours, but we don't have that. So appreciate you being on. We'll talk to you in the next TV party. Jesse, I'm going to throw it over to you. We're going to talk about, I'm going to let you comment on episodes 7 and 8. We got Crosshairs and Cold Steel. And again, I'm really going to push fast here and just let one person per couple episodes talk so that we can get through this before we lose recording time.
Sure.
This is of course our Morty Bennett episode. Woo, Morty, you dirty dog.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
He has himself a little date with a pro. Makes him lick a little something off the floor. Gives him a little pinch and squeal. You know what Ronnie likes. So
what the?
Ronnie Adams. So anyway.
Okay.
This episode. This episode is all about Morty. And then what happens to him, and then in Cold Steel. This is the bit where we haven't talked about this, and I would have liked to have dedicated more time to it, but I'm going to need you to talk about Frank developing a relationship with Micro's family, Micro's reaction to watching Frank develop a relationship with his family. I think at this point, this is the bit where the wife has kissed him. Specifically in this episode, this is the bit where this is after Zach's done punched his sister. He brought a knife to school, and Frank tries to give him some tough love. Turns out that's not what he needed. So go ahead. Crosshairs and Cold Steel, Jesse.
Okay, real quickly. With Crosshairs, that's where, just like Mark said, they went and found Marty Bennett, and then the whole place comes down on him. And the one thing that I took away from that episode is where Frank ran into the soldier in the tunnel, and he did not want to have to face this soldier because he was trying to escape, and the soldier had him dead to rights, and he knew, and he did not want to hurt this guy in any way, and he just told him, "Don't worry about it." And of course, the soldier, the good soldier that he was, pressed things, and that really put Frank in a spot where he didn't want to be, and he kind of talks about that after he does escape. It's not like the soldier brings him to his knees, so we know Frank had to do something he didn't want to do. Now, I think there's two things from Cold Steel.
He gets the best line after that whole sequence when he says, "It's easier when I can just kill people."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He he doesn't want to do that to this guy, and it's obviously a much easier thing for Frank to just end somebody that's done wrong in his eyes, but he knows this guy has not done anything. He's just following orders, just like he was at one point. But yeah, with Cold Steel and that whole dance that Frank had with Micro's family, his wife specifically, that was where I was really worried, because at one point a friend of mine sent me a message and said he didn't know much about the Punisher comic book, so he didn't know what he was getting into, and he sends me a message. He's like, is this stuff follow the comic book really closely? And I said, well, there's some stuff in there that I'm not too up on for sure, but I said, what point are you at in the series? And he said, sexy time. Well, I was really, really genuinely concerned that Frank was either going to sleep with Karen Page or he was going to sleep with Micro's wife. And what he was actually referencing was Dina, Agent Madani, and her nude ass all over the place. So that was where I was really glad that they played it off and they made Frank faithful to his dead wife. If that would have went overboard, and he's known, as a matter of fact, one of the first episodes of source material I ever did was Circle of Blood, and I think by issue 2 he's sleeping with one of the ladies in there. I didn't like that, and so I was really hoping they didn't do that here, and that's kind of what I took away from that. Now, the last thing I want to talk about Cold Steel is Agent. What's Madani's partner's name?
Sam.
I
think they just go by his first name.
Okay. Sam's death at the end of Cold Steel, where now it hurt my feelings. I was touched because he's dead and he's laying there and he's got blood coming out and he's looking right at Madani and he's trying to tell her, and the look on his face is probably the best part of acting that this guy did throughout the whole series, because I really felt like he was trying to tell her something, and the look on his face it was just filled with dread, because he knew he was dying, and he knew that his friend, his partner, was being betrayed by Russo, because Russo takes his mask off and shows him his face and then proceeds to stab him in his throat, and he's bleeding all over the place and not even able to talk. That really, I think there's like maybe 2 or 3 episodes that I commented on social media because, my opinion matters apparently, but no, it doesn't really. But I made sure to put on there, this episode, wow, the ending. This was one of the episodes where the ending had me going, okay, I felt what this guy was trying to do. And I didn't want Sam to die. But here's the thing. I didn't care for Agent Madani and that whole side story. I know there was a purpose behind it, but there could have been 75% less of it, in my opinion. But hey, we got what we got. And I like Sam. I didn't want to see Sam die. So there you go. Crosshairs and Cold Steel.
Okay. Robert, let's talk about Lewis's last stand here. Good old front toward enemy, which again is definitely a shade from Welcome Back, Frank. If you've read that story, and if you haven't, you can go ahead and listen to us discuss it intelligently. Ma Nucci got the ill communication on the Source Material podcast. So of course, Madani goes into a depression, blaming herself for Sam's death. Lewis goes on a bombing spree throughout New York City, sends Karen a letter that says, you're either with me or you're against me, et cetera, et cetera. This is where we get the other side. This is what we were talking about before, the other side of the gun debate with the liberal senator. This is the episode, I believe. No, it's the next episode where Lewis blows himself up, and I believe that's the one where you get the entire scenario done a couple of different ways from everyone's different perspective. So why don't you go ahead and give us 50 words or less on front toward enemy and virtue of the vicious?
Look, bombers are cowards. And that's not just my opinion. This is documented fact. If you ever look into behavioral sciences, bombers are fundamentally cowards by the time they reach that particular state. And that clearly sets, Frank off a little bit, that this guy is just bombing innocent people, and he's just, deeply unhappy about this. His confrontation, I like that you get a little bit more from Curtis in Front Towards Enemy, and he is wired up to explode, and he and Frank have that kind of heart-to-heart where Frank expresses his guilt over Curtis losing part of his leg. Curtis talks about how, no, I didn't wake up in the hospital as a fountain of sunshine and positivity. There was a lot of fun there. Virtue of the Vicious, which is actually a very famous Oscar Wilde quote. I believe it goes, patriotism is a virtue of the vicious. Which kind of plays here. I really liked getting the same sequence of events multiple times from different perspectives. It's one of my favorite things because it makes you question how much you can trust each individual who tells you the story. I got a very big soft spot for a movie called Basic that is about 80% an investigation where they do this, where you just get the same time frame and sequence of events from different people's perspectives. The action itself is fine. This one bothered me a little bit because, again, my maternal grandfather was a California Highway Patrolman for like 30 years, and he spent the last bit of that in protective services. State officials, specifically like governor and lieutenant governor, are not overseen by Secret Service. They're overseen by Highway Patrol. So, infrequently when watching movies that dealt with, again, security and protective services, he would point out to me how much they were doing wrong. Because and again, the lieutenant governor of California, who he was kind of responsible for looking after, that's a relatively important position. He traveled all over the world. He worked with Secret Service guys on several occasions. So when they set up the Anvil as his private security, and I'm watching that, it's just like, none of this. Just none of this. So again, but as far as that so that bugged me a little bit, but Lewis's tragedy is adequately gone through. There was some interesting stuff here, but it's mostly kind of to set up the next two episodes, which are just awesome from basically start to finish. I have a lot that I would love to say about Home, because my favorite episode of this whole season by a significant margin. But probably the other great moment from Virtue of the Vicious is the actual end, when Frank, having been shot repeatedly, mostly in the vest this time, and Karen is asked, because she's one of the people whose perspective on the events they get, Karen is asked by the detective in question, so how come we couldn't find him? We had this place locked down, and she just kind of laughs and goes, do you really think Frank Castle goes into a building that he doesn't know how to get out of? And then you see him zip-lining from rooftop to rooftop.
With the injured shoulder. Let's not forget
he was holding himself up with the other shoulder. Like, that's why he was only going one-armed.
I love you, but fuck you, okay? I'm so, you guys are going on and on and on about the shoulder, and I'm like, yeah, this is the thing that will zip-line across it with said shoulder. I don't want to hear it. This man is
after he wrenches it, jumping down the stairwell.
That's right. He messed his shoulder up and had to do a I don't know if he dislocated it or whatever, but it was bad.
He did something unhappy to it.
Yeah, it was not good.
No, but yeah, at least when he ziplines across, they had the internal continuity to have him holding the zipline with the other arm.
All right, we've lost Ronnie for the evening, so it's just going to be the three of us to try to get through the last bit of this before Blog Talk unceremoniously cuts the sound. All right, so let's just do all three here. Let's get this done. Danger Close, Home, and Memento Mori. This is the last 3-episode arc of the season. This is where all the strings are tied together. This is where everything comes to a glorious conclusion. Really, episodes 11 and 12 are probably my two favorites of the entire series.
They're great.
13 So, episode 13, which is basically just the one-on-one between Punisher and Jigsaw, I probably could have done without. It just goes on forever.
It didn't need an episode. It really didn't need a full episode for that.
No, this should have ended with episode 12, and the bit on the merry-go-round should have been like a 90-minute episode, and they could have just done that 30 minutes, at the end of Home here. But let's get to it. So Jigsaw captures Sarah and Zach. There's an exchange that happens where it's made to look like Micro has been killed, and the Punisher has been kidnapped by Russo and Rollins. They attempt to torture him in the power station where they've been hiding. This ends with Rollins' gruesome death after Russo betrays him, basically.
I was so happy that was as violent as it was. Like,
buddy.
Not a joke. Like, as a fan of violence, I loved it, but not a joke. My brother, my immediately younger brother, when he was watching this, after being introduced to Rollins as he still exists at the CIA, pauses it, looks over at me and says, "Does this asshole die as deserving as he should?" And I couldn't be too specific, but yes.
Yes. Absolutely.
So let's just, for the sake of time here, let's just react to, I'll let you guys react in turn to the last 3 episodes here. So I'll start with you, Jesse.
All right. So all 3 together.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll tell you one of the most moving moments was where Frank and Micro are he has to walk past his family, and his family realize that he's alive at that point. That had me going, that had to have been hard because Frank just kept saying, look straight ahead, do not move.
Keep it together.
It would be hard
Keep
to
it
do
together.
that. Yeah, it would be hard to do that. Especially, I don't know how long he was in hiding, but his family thought
about a year. I think
a year.
They said it's about a year.
It's a year, but it's said in the show it's a year to this point.
And imagine being in hiding and watching your family grow in front of you. They think you're dead, but you have all the cameras set up. Yeah, you feel like a part of them, but then you're going to have that longing to feel your son wrap his arms around you, your wife give you a kiss, whatever. It would be so hard to see them within feet, if not inches, from you and not react because he had to keep it straight. I think out of those 3, I'm going to let you guys espouse on the other because there's, the violence and the brutality that occurs. I will leave that up to the men who are
I got you
more
covered.
capable.
I got you covered
buddy.
for that.
So, but yeah, out of those 3 episodes, I'd say that was probably one of the more moving moments for me.
Look, let me say this before Robert jumps in. What I thought was great about 11 and 12 was the emotional components, the acting. I really thought the guy that plays Micro does a really stellar job of subtly playing all of the emotions that go along with the choice that he made, which was to fake his own death to protect his family. I'm not going to say that I didn't care for it, but I much like the merry-go-round in episode 13, and episode, I think it's 3 where he's naked the entire time. I just feel like a lot of the stuff just goes on for too long. I'm gonna call it the curse of the Netflix show, where because these are not like typical serial shows, it's basically a 13-hour movie, broken up into parts. There tends to be I've noticed this with Orange is the New Black, and I've noticed this with especially with the other Marvel shows. There's 1 or 2 episodes where it's the same beat for 60 minutes. It's like a techno song.
I think that they believe that they're trying to create some character development, but it's really, really too long in our eyes. It's like, okay, we get it.
So,
we understand what's going on.
Okay. Torturing Frank needed to be about 20 minutes shorter.
Yeah.
Like
that was fine.
Nope.
The issue is not the torture of Frank. It's more what they do in the interim. They spend way too much time with Micro and Madani.
You're not.
They needed something
you're not
different.
then you're not understanding what I'm saying. If that's your answer to that, you're missing my point. You can show Frank getting tortured, and you can show the other stuff. You don't need to show more of Frank getting tortured. That's the same beat over and over again. There was nothing accomplished with that, and that's the thing with shooting film, whether it's TV or a movie. It's and then going through the process of editing is putting up on screen what is necessary to tell the story. And I feel like a lot of the torture stuff wasn't necessary. You get the point.
I don't know. I think
I have a very specific disagreement with that I'm happy to get into in a second.
My thing is, I believe that they have to show you that this guy is human, and that you need to think in your mind, Mark Radulich, is he going to die? Because he is. He's only human.
Here. Hang on, I have a question. It's a simple yes or no. Please, let's not do yet another, hour and a half ramble into who knows the hell what. Yes or no? Is Frank any different, or is there any information gotten in any of what of him being tortured? Is he a different person by the end of that episode in any significant way? How?
Yes.
What's different about him? Okay. What?
Well, he comes to at one point he accepts that he's going to die. That's what I got out of it.
He was ready to die in episode 1. How is that different?
Winfrey?
What is fundamentally different, and it's the reason I love episode 12 so much. Like, there's a lot that I like about 11. I like the setup. I love Frank's massacre of that assault team. Because it's well shot, it's well acted, it's well executed.
Oh, that's some of the best stuff of the episode.
I really love Bernthal. Needs a ton of credit because he developed this roar that Frank gives out when he gets into battle. That is just the most blood-curdling thing. It's really low-pitched, and it just when he does that, it's why you ki in martial arts. It does something, and his roar is in that sequence when he grabs the M60 and basically shoots through an entire concrete column, which that particular weapon can do. But for those of you who doubt the veracity of that, it's glorious. The point of the majority of what takes place in Home is not actually the torture of Frank. It's where Frank goes in his own head.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Frank getting the crap...
arguing... Hang on. I at no time brought that up, although that got repetitive too. To how that ends, we could have gotten there a lot quicker.
And I would just disagree because I think you need to see how far he gets pushed and where he goes when he is coping.
We needed to see every bit of those moments. Hang on. We needed to see every bit of those moments in Transformers Age of Extinction. Every last one of them, Winfrey. Don't you remember? Oh, that's not the argument you made. You were telling me how much of that movie needed to be cut.
Yes, a lot of it did. And there's stuff in this show that needs to be cut. I'm not arguing that this is the tightest 13 episodes ever.
Okay. This I don't know. Maybe this boils down to a personal thing with you and I, but I didn't see the value in as much of the torture as they showed. I just didn't.
I might have to watch the episode again to see if I feel differently. Watching it the first time, that whole bit where he is, again, beaten, it all builds to that moment right before he stands up and violently murders William Rawlins.
After being injected with adrenaline. Oh,
which is the dumbest thing ever. Like,
it is too.
That was in the pantheon of bad villain decisions that immediately lead to their demise. Injecting Frank Castle with a dose of adrenaline might take the cake.
Absolutely.
But the moment before that, when his wife approaches him in his head, and you have to choose whether or not you want, whether you come with us and die or stay here, and the whole thing is framed with his with their previous discussion of, he's gone over so many times where is home now, and he has the opportunity to pass over and be with his family again, and instead he makes the very conscious decision that, no, my home is here in this absolute mess of blood and betrayal and misery. And I couldn't tell you the specific reason why in my makeup that got to me, but that broke my heart. That genuinely broke my heart.
I remember, I don't remember, it's episode 2 or 3 in Daredevil, where he's sort of explaining himself, and he's doing the penny for a dime speech. And I don't know if he's significantly different at the end of that episode than he was in Daredevil. See, the thing that makes Frank...
I would argue that there's a fundamental shift in his acceptance of who he is. And it's not a big thing in terms of the action. No, he's still going to take the same action that he would. But his acknowledgement that, no, my home is blood, misery, and death, rather than with my family, is very fundamental shift in how his character views the world.
See, to me, the only significant change in Frank is shown at the very, very end of 13. To me, he's in a lot of ways the same guy. He has a war in him in both Daredevil and all 12 episodes of this. Listen, let me make this argument. I think that Jehoshaphat Bernthal does an excellent job of portraying, of bringing to life the characterization of the Punisher. He's interesting to watch on screen. The shifting of his shoulders, the shake of his chin, the manner of speech that he chooses to use, that Goomba, Brooklyn, Italian voice that he chooses, all of that made for a very dynamic performance to watch for a character who did not change in not one but 2 shows until the very last moment. And it's that very last moment that is this saving grace. Hang on, I'm not done yet.
All right.
Wait. Let me finish.
Go ahead.
It's that very last moment is the saving grace of this character for me, and that is the acknowledgement that he's still a human being and that he does need help, and that having a war inside him is not a great way to live. When he opens up in group, that to me is the victory. He could have killed Russo at any time. He could have killed Rollins at any time had he been in the same room with him. That's who he is. He is the god of death, essentially. He is Marvel's god of death. But a Punisher who is willing to be vulnerable and sit in a room and talk about how this is probably not a good way to live, that to me is him winning the day. That, gaining back some sense of his humanity. But you don't get that until episode 13. You don't get that until the last 2 minutes of the episode.
I would argue that you wouldn't even get that point if he doesn't have that epiphany in episode 12. That is the payoff from his realization at the end of 12, is that this actually isn't sustainable.
And you're telling me that you needed absolutely all that footage to get there?
Yeah.
To get that point?
Consider how much denial this guy's in. Think about it. How much has he already endured and still deluded himself?
Okay,
it does take a significant amount of pain and near-death experience to force him into that position. You or I, we might get there through talking. Frank, no. There has to be a physical component to this for him.
Yeah.
And if he arrives there after the first 3 punches, it cheapens it.
Go ahead,
I have a question for you, Mark, okay? Because we all know how much of a mamby-pamby you are when it comes to kind of violence and gore sometimes. All right?
Okay.
All right, now, watching that series of scenes, I want to know, did it make you either get bored or did it make you feel uncomfortable?
Both.
I think if it made you feel uncomfortable, the length of those scenes did its job because that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make you go, oh shit, I don't like this.
Okay.
I do not like this. This guy better get his revenge.
So I did learn something about myself through watching The Punisher. I much prefer long repetitive scenes of people being shot with guns than I enjoy long repetitive scenes of people fist fighting.
Torture.
Okay. Punisher is far superior to Iron Fist in that respect. Story aside,
you enjoy
a guy
it.
running around.
You enjoy it more. That doesn't make it better. Be very clear about that.
That's what I'm saying. Like, in my mind, Punisher is a much better show than Iron Fist because man shoots gun and shoots everyone in the show. Yay! Man fights everyone with punches and kicks. Boo!
It's nice to know where your psychology lies in that, Mark.
Listen, my three favorite shows right now of all the Marvel shows, in no particular order, are Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and The Punisher. That's the best shit I've seen yet.
All right, last couple of things I wanted to bring up. I love the fight between Frank and Billy. I agree that it took too long getting there. Like, there's significant portions of that episode that should have been trimmed and merged with others. That's not my point of contention. When they actually get to shooting at each other and then stabbing and bludgeoning, and Frank just doing unholy things with a mirror, I loved every minute of that. I also
when we finally got there.
I agree. Like, the journey was ponderous. I won't deny it, but the payoff was spectacular. And I really liked, and this goes to, again, Frank's kind of pseudo-epiphany about who he is and who he wants to be. He doesn't kill him. And there's a very specific reason for it in this case. He just wants him to suffer more. He doesn't not kill him because he believes that there should be some greater sense of justice. It's just, no, you actually want to die, and for everything that you have done to me. I mean, the flashback they have in that episode where you see Billy and Frank and his family in that same location just when, in happier times, contextualized with where they wind up, it's borderline heartbreaking because it's such a tragedy, and Frank's daughter owning Billy with logic was just great.
All right.
So again, he gets to the end, and it's just, no, dying's easy. I want you to live in agony. Personally, I would have accomplished that via some form of paralysis in addition to massive facial trauma, but my way also would have prevented him from becoming a recurring villain, but that's how my brain works.
All right. I need 50 words or less in summation, and then we got to go. We are down to the wire. No pun intended.
You did that on purpose.
I'm counting
Jesse, you want to go first?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and say that, I really, really looked forward to this series, and I don't feel I was completely let down because there are a lot of parts of this show. What's that?
You feel like you were somewhat let down? No, well, you said something there, and I don't know if you meant to, but you was like, I wasn't completely let down. Well, you were somewhat let down?
No, I wasn't completely let down. No, well, I'll tell you, the only criticisms I have already been said, and that's there could have been a lot less of a few things throughout this series. And maybe it probably could have resulted in one or two episodes less, in my opinion. So I have my criticisms of it. Is it better than Season 2 Daredevil Punisher? And I'll tell you right now, I would have to go back and revisit, but I still hold his appearance there probably over the standalone series. And a lot of that's again, Punisher's good in small doses. When you really dive into the character, sometimes it's tough to keep your interest going without going, okay, get to that guy, get to the sawed off to some guy's head, or get to the bludgeoning. We want that in some fashion. But they did a great job of fleshing him out and putting a story around Frank Castle, the Punisher. So I enjoyed my time watching it. I had a great time. This was one my wife sat through with me, and we both enjoyed it. We both cringed. We both cheered. So I can't be unbiased and say that I would put this top of my Marvel shows because the Punisher's been my favorite character for quite a while. So, but I will say
100% agree. I would 100% agree it's not better than Luke Cage.
Oh, shut up.
Take
your
Winfrey.
concert crap and go elsewhere.
Gee, yeah. Punisher, Season 2, now with more concerts. Mark Radulich approves.
No, Mark would hate it because the music isn't to his taste. Like, I loved the musical choices in this, and the kind of dark country, just acoustic guitar opening is the best opening of all the Marvel shows by a significant margin.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, agreed. There's no disagreement there.
But yeah, that's all I have. I turn it over to you, Winfrey.
I love this show. There's so much about this that appeals to me on a personal level. Again, fan of violence. I love that the violence means something, which is my big criticism of, crappy horror movies and what the Saw franchise turned into and the filmography of Eli Roth. It has to mean something, and there is so much time in this show devoted to letting the actors act. The guy who plays Micro does a brilliant job. Anytime he's watching his family on those computer monitors, it's gut-wrenching. And he does a tremendous job of relaying that to the audience. Like Bernthal's Punisher, I don't know if he eclipsed what is, in my mind, the greatest acting moment in that character's history when he and Daredevil are just kind of commiserating in a cemetery before he's arrested. And he gives that beautiful soliloquy.
Oh, yeah.
But Bernthal is pretty clearly the Punisher. I would hate to be the guy who has to try and play Frank after this because you're not surpassing what he did. I love the musical choices that go into this. Like throughout significant portions of Home, you actually have, I believe, the just kind of very famous slow guitar portion of Painted Black. Excuse me, not Painted Black. I believe that's a Metallica song, but the Rolling Stones cover.
No, Painted Black is that's Painted Black. Painted Black
that
is
is Painted
Rolling
Black.
Stones.
Thank you. Well, it's actually the Stones cover of something, if memory serves me, but neither here nor there. And again, it is the acting and the characters that actually give the violence context. So it's not just mindless. It's not just, let's see how many different ways we can kill someone with a knife. Because you're invested and because the actors do such a good job, it still means something. That you go whole episodes without a violent murder spree. So that when it does happen, it still carries weight. That is so important.
Yeah.
The violence has to mean something. Otherwise, it serves no purpose. And again, there's issues with certain episodes in this show, but far and away, the majority of the action and the bloodletting was done correctly. And I have to applaud the showrunners for striking that balance where it still mattered, and it wasn't just, we must spray brains across the screen.
As I wasn't joking when I said this is in my top 3 in no particular order: Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and this one. I really did enjoy this. I'm in agreement with a lot of what both of the guys before me said. This could have used a dose of editing, but overall, I enjoyed the story. I'll repeat what I said in source material. The Punisher is best when he's facing obstacles that prevent him from slaughtering people, so that when you finally get to him slaughtering people, as Winfrey said, it is meaningful. Just watching 13 episodes of him, murdering people nonstop wouldn't have been any fun. It wouldn't have been a good story. The best parts about this are and I say this all the time, but the best parts of the Punisher, for me,
is the acting.
Were
it genuinely is the acting.
The relationships between the characters, good, bad, or indifferent, or as incompetent as some of the characters are in this show, it is the relationships that keep bringing me back. And then you would get the payoff of Frank slaughtering people with a machine gun. Look, I'm tired. I have work tomorrow. Jesse has work tomorrow. It is 3 hours, and we are just shy of midnight. I want to thank everybody for coming on. I apologize for how the shit show this started with. We don't need to revisit that, but just, we got our act together. We did an extra hour to get through it all. Thank Sean, thank Ronnie, thank Robert, thank Jesse. For everybody, this has been TV Party's review of The Punisher Season 1. I think this is the last TV Party of the year. We're back in January with a bunch because there won't be any Damn You Hollywoods. Check out the Damn You Hollywood reviews for... we have one more Stevie Party left. We have The Crown, Season 1, with Andrew Graham next week. Then Star Wars, then Jumanji, and then we start it all over again in January. All right?
I hate my life.
Thank you. Be well, be safe, and behave.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's #1, #2 employee. Leave a message at the... Hi, Jamie. It's you, Jamie. Don't be alarmed, but I think there's a guy following you. Maybe we should get that guard dog we talked about? Nothing too scary. Maybe like a Bichon with an attitude? Progressive's collision insurance covers injured dogs and cats at no extra cost, so... Wait, the guy stood up when I stood up. He's on the phone. He's looking right at me. Oh, wait, it's just my reflection. Don't tell anyone about this.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet coverage not available in New Hampshire and North Carolina.
You've reached the Holiday Helpline. We turn the holidays into holidays.
Hi, I want to surprise my wife and kids with some super stylish gifts.
Surprise! With all the velvet and sparkly styles you'll find at Old Navy, it's your time to shine.
Old Navy?
Yep, the entire store is up to 60% off right now.
Up to 60% off?
And women's dresses start at just $15, 12 for girls, with tops from $6 for adults, 5 for kids at Old Navy and OldNavy.com.
No surprise here. I'm going to Old Navy.
Turn your holiday into a holiday. Get to Old Navy today. Valid 12/6 to 12/12. Excludes in-store clearance gift cards. Register lane items today only and 2-day only deals.